Welcome to budget meeting number 3.
Four.
I was going
School, yeah, the school is 4. This is 4.
School's 4, okay.
Yep.
Budget meeting number 4, 3 or 4. Charlie?
Thank you, Chair Beal. I think we're going to get right to it. I apologize for having some of the inserts, but this is Public Works Night, as is in your agenda. It's one of our largest departments, and our new Public Works Director and Public Works Administrator, Mike and Amanda, have just been doing incredible work of consolidating budgets and kind of making them a lot more similar to what the wastewater budget was, which to me kind of set the standard in our Public Works area. So they've done a ton of work, but we noticed some discrepancies in some of the original submissions and how it was tracking in Cassell. So as opposed to having you go from your book with some data that wasn't perfect, we wanted to we've been working over the last week to do a little bit of a reprint. So we'll have to bear with me tonight. We'll be reinserting as we go through some of the areas. I'm sorry that the page numbers won't necessarily match anymore, but this will be the only one we do this for. So, and with that, we're going to start with the harbor and Sara, who has been stepping in along with Mark Reverick from our commission. And we'll go from there.
Hi, everyone. Todd couldn't be here tonight. He's the interim harbor master, so I'm pinch hitting for him.
And sorry to interrupt, but at the end of this, just because there's a lot of things in here, just we will do an agenda discussion for the rest. I've had some conversations with Amy in the school, and we'll do an overview done by Nate, our finance director, on kind of where the city's budget's at, where we're at now, now that we have the school budgets in, what that makes at current level, where the tax rate's at, where the levy would be. Just so you guys over the next few meetings can directionally know, okay, this is where we're at now. If we want to go lower or get the tax rate to lower, we can, kind of like last year, it'll be interactive. You can plug numbers in and see how it affects the tax rates, see how it affects Mr. and Mrs. Ellsworth at the $200,000 level, at the $500,000 level, at a variety of other pieces. So at the end of this, we'll switch towards kind of final agenda to land this plane, and a bit on kind of where we're at from a broader perspective in terms of the mill rate, levy rate, those types of things. So,
I have one question before you roll. Is there any decision from assessing where the valuation is?
So the I want to, and we have had a conversation. Once we get the levy out. And I've noticed some other cities, like Brewer had a great process where they actually have kind of like a separate process with city council, because the levy is the levy. This is what we're going to be at. And then the valuation process, we can go a little bit deep diver on that kind of hockey stick on growth we've seen and why we've seen like a 5% or a 7% increase, and having Larry come in and have a discussion on where we want the valuation to be, and how that affects the mill rate, how it affects the higher businesses, how it affects others. And Brewer had a really, I think, robust discussion on that valuation piece once their levy was set. So I want to basically almost have like a separate conversation with this council about that alone. Now, granted, those commits and those pieces won't be final and go out until August. But we can, at least Brewer did it, so I'm assuming that's legal, to have a city council discussion about the valuation increase, why it's determined, how the assessor does that. And there was some conversation with council on back and forth, should we be at this, and if we increase the valuation, it drops the mill, but it affects different areas in different ways, and people have seen this big of a valuation increase previously, and we don't want to go too far in our mill rate. So to that point, Steve, yes, and I want to have like almost a separate meeting on that piece.
And then the valuation itself, it's effective April 1st, so he doesn't usually start doing inspections and things for growth and new value until April 1st, because that's by law. That's when it is. So.
And I'm sorry, Sara.
That's okay, no problem.
But I figured we'd get a little bit of the paperwork out of the way. So
Sure.
Up to you.
Just a quick update on the activity that's going on in the harbor this spring. Public Works and Todd and I went down there earlier this month and identified some repairs to the bathhouse that need to be done, including painting. The paving contract's going to be paving the harbor parking lot first, so that'll be all ready to go for harbor opening. And there's going to be some upgrades to some permanent pergola structures. Right now, they're kind of like easy ups that provide shade coverage. So there's going to be some permanent construction of those structures down at the harbor. So the harbor's open from May 15th to October 15th. Staff does Staff is at the facility 7 days a week from 9 a.m. to 5. In this harbor budget, we did put in there for a full-time seasonal harbor master at $45,000. Other things on the budget, revenues are staying flat for the harbor. There were no increases proposed for the revenues. As far as expenses, like I mentioned, the full-time seasonal harbor master is in there. I'm just gonna go through really quick because most of them are pretty flat from last year. We had to do what every other department had to do by adding legal, printing, and insurance, so those will be an increase that you'll notice on the line items. Membership dues did increase a little bit, just with projections for the membership dues to the Maine Association of Harbor Masters, which our harbor master did just go to a training and pass his certification testing. Professional services does include $5,600 for cleaning, which we're gonna hear later tonight. If we do move forward with a full-time janitorial services, that would get taken out of this $10,000 professional services. So that would be an adjustment that would need to be made there. Office supplies went down. Safety supplies, which is, I believe is life jackets, gloves, things like that. Everything else is pretty much the same. So that was pretty quick. So I don't know if you have other questions about the harbor budget.
Yeah, I'll just do the manager adjustment summary. I talked about this briefly at the last council meeting, but, I'm declining for now the full-time harbor master, at least for this season, and keeping the $5,700 stipend for the highway employee who's acting is an acting harbor master capacity with the 2 part-time positions, which is a similar structure to how it was done last year. I'm very interested in the full-time seasonal harbor master. That's in many ways the way Castine does it. I know the Harbor Commission is looking into this as well. There's been talk about potential, like the inland water. There's some other folks that do that way. So I do feel like there's definitely a potential for that, but we're not quite there yet, and need a little more time to kind of put that together. Also, as mentioned last time around, going towards a Parks and Rec director, I think one of the things in this budget cycle, now that I've had a full time with it, that I've noticed is a substantial amount of the budget, harbor, arbor, Parks and Rec, or Rec, parks and cemeteries, and there's later today, there's a Parks, Trees, and Cemetery in the highway budget, and I know in the Rec Commission and Arbor and others, in Harbor, there's kind of a disconnect. There's a staff member that's sort of a liaison, but we've had some turnover, and that kind of happens, but I really feel like there's so much of that budget, and we'll talk about this in the Parks and Rec director request that I'm making later here. There's so much budget right now is sort of seasonally looked after. I'd say, all right, this is coming up, and all of our boards and commissions don't have enough staff support to kind of, it's sort of who's going to authorize this, who goes in which piece, which part of the budget, and I think part of having a Parks and Rec director, really, having to have, budget responsibility for those different commissions, so that they're just, somebody's on that piece of the budget. They're going out to those boards and commissions much earlier to sort of outline the process, how it gets in there, how the recommendation's made, seeing all those pieces, fitting them together, and how they work with facilities and how they work with public works. I think, just structurally, I don't think I realized that last year. I know we had to make some tough cuts and calls, and we decided not to go forward to the Parks and Rec director or department then, but to me, that's, and it was talked about at the council meeting, that's a big reason, that we could do a lot better in this category, and it feels like there needs to be a much bigger investment in the harbor and the arbor and all these other places, and just to have a little bit more connection between staff and the commissions and the resources. And as we talked about with TIF funding too, there could be some potential reallocations based on the debt service falling off, so we can invest more in our harbor and more in our beautification efforts in Knowlton Park and other pieces. And we're going to keep talking about that, but I feel like right now, until that new structure's in place, kind of keeping as is. Mark, do you want, Mark or anybody else from the harbor want to come up, or?
I think Sara nailed it. Nice job. It is important to kind of
You gotta
know,
step up to the podium, Mark. They can't hear you. Well, they can hear you, but they can't see you.
Hi, I'm Mark Remick from the Harbor Commission. There is one line I would like to have reconsidered, and that is the income from the alewives. It doesn't show on harbor revenue, and it really should. That's a harbor function. That changes a couple of dynamics that are important to the harbor. When we go to pursue grants or other funding outside the city, one of the first questions they ask is, are you a working harbor? How do you support that? Well, working harbors are commercial. And so the LY fishery, that's a 30K or so add to our, what shows in our budget. So it does help with those types of conversations.
Interesting.
So that was what I had. Other than that, Sara nailed it.
That's an interesting point. I kind of, and as council knows, there's been a few of these areas of revenue, like, if you didn't have to work for it, like, you know, if it's just kind of coming in, like with finance, I think they had a piece of like, the percentage that comes off of credit card fees or what, or something other that kind of comes back. Well, they didn't really have to do too much. They're just, because of the finance department, is that really a revenue for finance? Or is it just captured overall? But they do provide services to wastewater, water, like
Big
that's a
interest.
revenue that they do a lot of hours on. So I was kind of considering that for Alewives, but to your point, Mark, like there's more of a structural piece, and like that is part of what makes Ellsworth unique, is that L verb, and having it so that when we talk to the Army Corps of Engineers and we can show them our budgets, that it is a working waterfront. I could definitely see that being a big value, even though, you know, the assistant harbor, or the part-time harbor folks that are out there are not actually catching alewives and bringing them in.
No, but they're using our harbor to do it.
They're using our harbor to do
And they're
it.
within the harbor limits, so.
Right. I could definitely see that. So we'll make a note. Ashley's already making it, I'm sure.
Ashley, thank you.
And actually, that's one other edit Ashley and I were talking about. You know, she's sending out after every one of these meetings to me the change log, but I think we'll just start sending it to council as well. It's your change log. You're going to see it anyways. But Ashley will probably just start sending that directly. And for that, our last meeting here, we'll have, you know, a discussion of the change log, and then also kind of a separate log of the new requests fully priced out, so that when we see the final rate based on all the requests, based on some council recommendations, you all have broadly, you know, if you want to cut further, or keep or add further. There are some requests here that I decline that you may want to make higher, that we'll have that data at the end to consider without having to go through 800 pages again, so. And now we have highway. All right, or no? Is it? Water supply, sorry, water supply protection.
No, I'm just gonna say really quickly that John was supposed to be on vacation, so, I was gonna present, but Mike Harris, Public Works Director, but he's here, so I'm gonna let him present, but I'll be here to help him if there's some numbers that he doesn't know. So go ahead, John.
Thank you for coming in on your vacation, John.
Pleasure, pleasure.
Oh, it is.
Wonderful. Is it showing up behind me now? How do we make it happen?
Do you,
I can share it.
do you want your screen?
It is up here from Ashley, that, the numbers are the same.
Very good.
Or you could share
It's fine.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
You already have your insert.
Yes, those are the old versions.
Okay. Further away from me.
Hello, folks, ladies and gents. I know most of you, some of you I may not. I'm John Wedin. I work for the Water Department. Part of my bailiwick is the watershed protection for our water supply. And as part of our protection for our water supply, we keep an eye on the land and the water itself in Branch Lake. What you'll see this year is some new numbers and some new categories, different from what we've proposed in the past. The key factor to think about is we're not proposing anything different. We're not proposing anything remarkably more expensive than we have in the past in any category. The only difference is the categories have changed. So you may see numbers that may have some interesting pluses and minus factors with them. Please don't be afraid. The numbers we're proposing, the things that we're proposing to do with them are no different than we have in the years past. I proposed a $16.75 wage rate for our part-time boat inspectors starting of the fiscal year, getting $16.50 right now. So again, not a huge increase. That's the only increase period, really. Even though you will see some other figures up here that will make you scratch your head, they are the result of moving funds and allocations from one category to different categories here because of our new accounting software. I'll happily entertain any questions such as, what's that?
It's pretty straightforward.
Say, I don't know managers.
Yeah, what about why is the payroll so much higher? Did I miss that in the
No, you didn't
details?
miss it. So what happened is, John's salary, so the watershed protection budget, half of it comes out of water, half of it comes out of general fund.
Right.
But all of his salary has been coming just out of water and none of it out of the general fund. So we split the salary and took half out of water, half out of the general fund. Oh, and then, yeah, so watershed pays the clerks $10,000 to help with stuff that they do with branch lake. So that has been included also in these budget numbers.
The power just hadn't been budgeted for, or had come out of something else in previous years?
Yes, that has been, that has been reallocated as well. The power in past that we have paid for in the past has been coming out of a couple different accounts, but more importantly is what we've been billed for hasn't always been billed directly to this account. Versant has many, many hundreds of accounts for the city itself. We're trying to get a better handle on what those accounts are. Right now, the primary power that we're paying for is for the host, state park host sites that the city agreed to build 10 years ago to help provide for labor at the boat launch. And so when we get a lot of hosts/volunteers in to help with their labor, the more they hang out, the longer they hang out, the more power they use, the more water they use, the more wastewater they use, that kind of thing. And we pay for that to cover the cost of labor. And so as that changes, and it changes year to year, depending on how many volunteers we get, that number can change pretty dramatically. But always in response to the amount of people who show up as volunteers.
Anything else? Thank you, John.
Pleasure.
Now on to Public Works Administration. Some of the inserts here.
So I'm just gonna speak really briefly on this because Amanda's really gonna do the presentation on it. But this is a new budget that was created this year.
Is this all in the new stuff that you gave, or is it in the?
Yeah, it's in the new
Sure.
insert.
It's in the new.
Yep.
Thank you. Sorry, Mike.
Public Works Administration.
So this is what you should see also in your budget books. This is just something that I have going on. And so really, in the past, when we had a public works director, and then they didn't really have a way to track what they were spending. So they would just, if they needed to pull money out of wastewater, they'd pull money out of wastewater, or they'd pull money out of water, or they'd pull it out of different accounts, but it was really untracked spending. So, for example, when the previous Public Works Director was here, like her gasoline, she was pulling out of my gasoline budget, but I don't know how much it was, and then uniform, she was pulling out of whoever's budget, so. For the purposes of accuracy and tracking, we propose to create this budget, and it's funded from water, wastewater, highway, and solid waste. So we would have an expense line in their accounts and then a revenue line in the Public Works Administration account. And so with that,
You go, Amanda.
Hey, Mike.
Hi, Amanda Ray, longtime viewer, first time speaker. I'm the Public Works Administrator. So as Mike was saying, he stole half my little spiel here, but.
sorry.
Say it again.
In our ongoing commitment to enhance transparency and fiscal responsibility, we are requesting a new budget specifically for tracking Public Works Administration costs. This new budget includes 3 existing positions: the Public Works Director, myself, the Public Works Administrator, and also the Utilities Coordinator, who was previously split between water and wastewater funds in their budgets. By separating the Public Works Administration costs from other operational expenses, we provide a clearer picture of how funds are utilized in this budget as well as other Public Works departmental budgets. This enables us to better monitor spending patterns and make more informed financial decisions. The projected funds for Public Works Director and Public Works Administrator will be funded as follows: 1/3 from Water Department, 1/3 from Wastewater Department, and the remaining 1/3 will be split equally between Highway and Solid Waste. The funds projected for the Utilities Coordinator will still be split 50-50 by Water and Wastewater, but will be tracked in the Public Works Administration budget. This funding structure ensures equitable distribution of costs while maintaining financial stability across all involved departments. To ensure accurate cost distribution, a Public Works Administration line has been added to each applicable department budget as well as a revenue line in the Public Works admin budget. Additionally, adjustments have been made to other line items to reflect the reallocation of some of the funds. And I printed out my little worksheet that I had just to show the breakdown, so I'll pass that out too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We can just pass it out.
Thank you. Any questions?
And I should note that there's sort of a city manager adjustment, but I've talked to Mike and team about that. I'm probably going to pull out, if it's okay with council, relative to, I was going to add about $16K in professional services last week. Sara and I attended the Maine City and Town Manager Association meeting and saw a bunch of interesting presentations, but there was one from Camden City Manager about a service they've used, which is like kind of like one of those Google street tracking kind of car things. It uses LiDAR and it went through all of their roads and drove every road in Camden and then produces like a conditions assessment so that you can know down to like all the potholes, all the grading, all the issues, and it sort of spits out a very detailed report on the condition of all the roads and where you need to be. So to me, there was like okay, biggest city landmass in Maine. We've already made a pretty decent investment in some very needed roads, but upon conclusion of that work, it was $8,000 for Camden. I was roughly thinking around $16,000 here. Upon conclusion of our next round, like I'd like to have that vehicle do a tracking and produce a report so that the next rounds of road funding can really be a much more analytical. Once those 1.6 is fresh, this is what's going to produce. But to me, that we talked about it, that more is in the SIP planning side of things, and I think I don't need to have new money in this tax budget for that, but I think that's going to be a very valuable thing we can do, but could probably be more in the SIP planning funding or local roads allocation, which we've already, we have some surplus there left this year too. So ignore that piece.
What is floors?
It's the new group dynamics. So the
Flores.
HRA spending.
I
So
gotcha.
the enterprise accounts, we have to account for the benefits in the enterprise accounts.
Yeah.
So that's the portion of that.
Okay.
The vehicle leases, is that just for 3 vehicles?
Nope,
then?
that is Mike's truck, and we are requesting a second vehicle for the Public Works.
For all of Public Works, or just the admin?
So it would be, day-to-day would be for my use, back and forth for meetings and going to the different departments with the different, with highway and water offices and city hall and all that. But also if there were trainings, like we just went to Brewer, 4 of us went to a training yesterday in Brewer. So we crammed in a pickup truck and drove to Brewer.
Yeah, and Amanda's currently the only person in like this Public Works unit that doesn't have that. It wouldn't be a take-home vehicle. We're actually targeting it as another option for if we can get one of those very cheap EVs, and once we install the infrastructure, it might be another good recommendation there. And also, one of the reasons I'm moving forward with this one as well is we've got the other code car, but that other police car is in poor shape, so other employees might be able to use this as well.
It's just kind of difficult. I think it makes a lot of logistical sense to combine all of these things and track them more efficiently, but it's hard to tell what is new this year from last year. Because it would have been very difficult to find that one
Right.
additional vehicle.
So just for example, like all of the pay was proposed last year to be split a third from each department. So we took those line items out of the other budgets, just to have this one line for, they're cleaner that way with their budget, just having that one for this total. So those are carryover. We took some of the like conferences and trainings out of wastewater for some of the conferences that Mike goes to. And then one of the reasons why that's a little bit higher is all 3 of us that make up this department are new in our positions. So that's why we had that one. The licenses, I think we took that out of wastewater for some of your licenses. The safety for you, we took some out of wastewater for that.
Well, the safety is not just for me.
Right.
It's for Amanda, because sometimes she'll come out to road jobs and things like that, so she can learn what we're doing out in the street. And so she needs to make sure she has her safety vest and hat and stuff that she's supposed to have when she's in the roadway with the rest of us working or whatever. So we just wanted to have some money put in that safety to make sure we can properly equip myself and her.
And same for uniform and clothing. Some of that was for some of Mike's uniforms from wastewater. And then the benefits, obviously, were a carryover from previous.
So, other than the vehicle, did you have any new requests? Because on the front it says there were no new requests, but you've got a vehicle in here. Is there anything else?
No.
Well, that's it.
No, I'm sorry, that was a miss. We mentioned it in the line narratives under the vehicle, but we missed putting that up front. We'll change that too.
I think you asked, I can't remember the answer, if it was just the additional lease cost for that new vehicle? Was there a line for
Yeah,
that?
so the total would be the 2. So Mike's truck that he's currently using, and we estimated.
We got a number from Enterprise. Remember, last year we got a quote, sorry. Last year, we'd gotten a quote from Enterprise for a lease vehicle, a Santa Fe, I believe it was. So I took that number as an estimate. I believe it was $900 a month or something along that line. Huh?
So it's about half and half.
$750.
There we go.
How much is it?
$750 a month for that lease vehicle estimated. And then the other piece of that is the lease for the truck that I'm driving.
And you're already leasing that, right?
Yeah.
That's just a bring over.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just bringing it.
Bring over. Brought over.
It's already leased.
Carryover.
Carryover, thank you.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and we could bring that, if we do a similar to the EV for code that that's more in the $400 range, we could bring that down a bit.
Sounds good.
Good job for your first
Thanks.
Yeah,
time through.
great job, thank you.
Yeah, I should also note for, Amanda's one of the unsung heroes around here. Might be her first presentation. She watches all the meetings, incredibly hardworking, and, she's been in finance in our other offices pretty much nonstop for the past couple months, so thank you so much, Amanda. Mike does okay too, but.
Thanks, buddy.
Oh, no, you're good, you're good.
We're going to, what's next?
Public Works now.
Public
Highway.
Works Highway.
So, just really quickly, I'd just like to point out, for the highway department, they've had a really strong year. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of things, accomplishments that they've had. So in the fall, we did some culvert work down on Water Street, and I don't know how many people noticed, but there was no more ice flow on Water Street this winter. No more grader going down there and scraping all the ice up. So we made that disappear. We've also did a bunch of work out on Happytown and Winkenpaw, the Four Corners, in concert with the Branch Pond Association and Hancock County Water and Soil Conservation, where we did a bunch of riprap work and a bunch of work along the roads out there to keep the silt from washing into Branch Lake Stream and then into Branch Lake. That particular piece will be left to do on that piece is we are going to pave. It was in the local roads bid that you guys just approved to pave the hill coming down Happytown Road to the Four Corners and then taking a right and going up Winkenpaw across the stream and paving that piece as well to eliminate even more gravel runoff and silt runoff into the Branch Lake Stream. We've had a very long winter, and so the guys have been doing a great job, I think, keeping the roads clean, working long hours. So they deserve a lot of credit for that. Of course, Brian is the new highway foreman, and Nate is the new crew leader, and so they're stepping up and doing the best that they can, and they're doing a great job. And so I just wanted to recognize them for that. And then lastly, I would just like to say that the highway department as a whole would like to thank the council for the investment that they've made with us this year. We've invested a lot of money in new trucks and equipment, and we really appreciate it. And we also look forward to working on the courthouse road. If that comes to fruition, we're ready to rock and roll to help the city. When that comes to fruition, we're ready to rock and roll to try and save the city as much money as possible while producing a road that everybody can be proud of. So that's my overview for highway. Brian is here, so if you have any questions, he's here to answer, but.
And just a quick piece on the manager adjustment was bringing back down the local roads funding to last year's level, which is 320, as we're in kind of more of a bond cycle with our roads, and I think we'll kind of continue to be on that. So that was my larger change here. I think that this, if we're really looking to cut more on this piece towards the end, and we're trying to get the mill rate down, this is as different from local roads maintenance. This is, I've thought about, this parklet is in pretty tough shape. It's a pretty highly used area. I've thought about using that. There's a couple other pieces in the police station that could use some funding. So, but at the same time, with us being on, so having a significant chunk here, so that if we need to do some additional paving. That's why it's been there in previous budgets. It was in some ways much larger, but now with us being more in a bond cycle, it feels like we may not have to be as large in this category moving forward. So, as always, I think could talk to Tammy last cycle. When you get to the end of the line and you're trying to drop the mill, local roads is oftentimes where you're at with it. But we're kind of sticking at last year's level for now. But as we get to the end part of the cycle, I think we might want to revisit too.
And so basically, the highway department, we've had a few increases along the way. And we've had some decreases based on changes that were made in unique contracts. So uniform and clothing allowance is a little different, it's down a little bit. Capital outlay was originally proposed at 500,000, that's where local roads was being kept, but I think that's gonna end up in your capital improvement section. So that it would probably actually, whatever your recommendation is, would end up coming out of this particular budget and being in the, living in the CIP piece. Local roads maintenance, we bumped it up a little bit because with the new reimagining of the highway department and also with the amount of local roads that we've approved to be paved, some of those roads are gonna need to have work by us done, cross culverts replaced and things like that before the paving can happen. And so we bumped it up a little bit to be able to include money to complete that work. Because we don't want to pave roads and then leave a bad culvert in the ground. So we'll go through the roads, and the roads that need to have us replace culverts and things like that, we'll do that. And then the pavers can come through and pave the road.
Good.
Mike, that's been dropped from 100,000 and Charlie dropped it to 60,000,
Yeah.
it looks like on there, so does that still cover the costs of being able to do that with that 60,000?
I don't know, because we don't have a full inventory of how many culverts and stuff we're gonna need to replace on these different roads. So I just wanted to carry money in there enough for us to be able to do that work and make sure we didn't have a shortfall and have to overrun a line item if we didn't have to.
Question. I see the vac truck lease.
Yep.
Do we have a vac truck yet?
Should have it, it's being built.
Yeah, and this will be the first year we're paying on it,
I
so
thought
that's
we
the
had
first.
a year grace.
Yeah, so this budget, so that first payment is gonna be in the 26 budget. So we approved it in December or whatever of this budget. And then it's not gonna, the first payment's not gonna come due until, I think, November of 26 or something like that.
But when are we gonna get it? I thought we
May,
had
I
a-
believe.
Yes, I thought we had a
May or
year's
June.
grace period from when we got it, not from.
I mean, I can check with the manufacturer.
Yeah, because I thought that's how you
Because
showed it to us.
even if it's a year from May, it's still gonna be in this budget.
The first payment?
Yeah.
And it's a yearly payment?
Yeah. And it was actually, originally it was budgeted 36,833 and it's dropped to 33,800, so.
Oh, okay, so it's not a monthly?
No.
Oh, okay, it's an annual,
It's an annual.
one annual payment? Okay.
Yep. The other thing I wanted to point out in,
Sorry, you have something, Patrick? You want to ride the vac truck?
Go ahead.
'Cause the,
oh, no, he's already signed up for the,
I'm excited, I want the first ride in the vac truck. I just had a question, sorry, in two lines above, or the line above, Public Works Administration, I'm just trying to figure out, that's the payment to your side, and is that just kind of everything that is due from highway? That's like the one line, like, so
Well,
if I added up
yeah,
everything
so-
in highway here, it add, because I look at that and it looks like it's
It's not a third, and a third.
no, so what
a different number.
yeah, so what ended up happening, if you look at the sheet that Amanda gave you, you'll see that there's a breakout on there for the general fund employee benefits. That's not included in the highway and, because it would go under the general fund employee benefits section.
Oh, so there's another piece here that's not seen? No.
It's not on that.
So this, the budget book says the
Oh.
51,000, it's not the updated.
Oh, okay. So I see.
So that number's different?
Yeah, so that number is lower. The budget book number is
35,680.
higher. That's the number that was the final number that we came up with after we split out the solid waste, highway, and then some of that money would be under the employee benefit section of the general fund.
Yeah, so this number you guys have on this sheet is 35,680, so
Yep.
is that what that number should be for
Yep.
that line?
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah,
I'm saving us
That's
money
like-
left and
Wow.
right.
It's
Well,
okay,
if
it
you
just
count
goes
the
back in on
solid
solid waste though, so. Doesn't help the levy, but.
That's true.
and then the other thing I wanted to point out that I didn't mention earlier is there used to be a budget for highway and then a separate budget for highway garage. And so we merged the two budgets into one budget, so there are some extra line items in here for like heat and building maintenance, power, things like that. That would have been in the highway garage budget we used to have, but now it's all incorporated into the highway budget. And that's one of the reasons why you see some of the increases you see is because we got rid of that whole budget and then just moved everything into the highway budget. Because I wasn't sure why we had two separate budgets, one for highway department and then one for the highway garage.
Yeah, and to your point, John, this one's gonna be a little bit, because we're consolidating, but it feels like moving forward, we'll be able to kind of track and monitor things better. There's also some minor adjustments here that I made to like fuel and equipment and maintenance, because we're going to newer trucks. You know, we talked to Enterprise, that was one of the bigger pieces of this too, that we're going to a lease cycle, that we should start seeing better fuel efficiency. We should start seeing less vehicle maintenance and needs there,
Yep.
so.
We added some lines just like we did the other budget, so they didn't have professional services and some of the other lines, so to give you a really quick rundown, we added telephone, training and conferences, ground maintenance and mowing, professional services, information and technology, and power to the budget. And then building maintenance, printing and advertising, heat, legal, propane, insurance, public works administration, debt service so last year when you approved all the safety equipment, we fronted the money out of the wastewater capital improvement fund, and then that line item is them sending that money back to the reserve account that we paid for that safety stuff out of. And then just recently, the new Doppler service that we are going to for mass notification and public works callouts and things like that. A portion of that is also added into this budget.
So this is like a new fix-it-ticket system, so we'll have 24-hour coverage for people to call in and report something. And a little bit, I noticed was one of the things earlier in my tenure here, there's just a lot of call this, call that, how does it get put in? And we've just a much better tracking system for that, and the ability to call really at any hour and at a pretty reasonable price.
Yeah, 15 grand for you.
Yeah, we
24-hour human answering service. Mass notifications. If we have to have a call out for, let's say a water main break, Doppler would actually do the call out to everybody. You wouldn't have to go through dispatch and then they call us. And there's also a dispatch module that allows the police dispatch to, instead of having to look and see who they're supposed to call, and they just use the dispatch module through Doppler, send it, and then Doppler handles the rest of it, and it frees them up to not have to worry about that if they got other public safety stuff going on.
So hopefully rolling that out over the next couple months, and I think it'll be a big upgrade for folks around here to get some things fixed. Although Brian's doing a great job. I receive much fewer of those calls these days. So, and he did. We had one question on the call-in show recently about all the water that gets aggregated on what's the name?
Oak Street.
On Oak Street.
Yeah. So we're hoping, by the way, to take care of that next week.
Oh, good.
Yep.
Made me seem very, I don't know, smart. It was the word.
We are trying to get stuff done. So we got rid of the ice flow. We're gonna get rid of that water. We're trying to be proactive and responsive, and so that lakefront property on Oak Street will soon be not lakefront property anymore.
Mike, I just want to make sure that the ground maintenance and mowing is different than what we'll bring up in parks, trees, and cemeteries from planting and park maintenance.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep,
Because that's just city buildings.
We have a crew that goes around every summer and they mow the Meyer Fields and Knowlton Park and all that stuff, and we're just trying to capture how much money we're actually spending in that effort. And the repairs and stuff on the mowers and things like that.
So that you're pulling over into the highway side and not.
So the parks, I'm sorry, which line item did you call?
I'm right now in the highway budget. You have the grounds maintenance and mowing.
Yep.
But then I'm assuming in the parks, trees, and cemeteries, in the planting and park maintenance, you've included mowing there too.
I haven't touched the parks and trees, and that cemetery's budget.
Okay. So that could potentially be
I'm leaving
a
that to
duplicate.
Charlie, that's where the beautification is happening and things like that.
Yeah, let me look into that.
Recreation still has mowing of several.
Does it
different
still have
fields.
mowing? Let me see if that's duplicated here. Is, Amanda, is this more for the maintenance of our mowers and all those?
Yeah, it was asked for to just keep track of, like, sorry. It was asked for just to keep track of for repairing any lawn mowers or gasoline, that kind of thing, so.
Okay, so that's more of a repair
Yeah.
line item here.
Maintenance.
Maintenance mode, maintenance, okay. Thank you.
Tam's got one.
Red pen is up.
Red pen.
I recognize. Go ahead, Tanya, sorry, I'm looking at
Town.
So the liquid calcium, at least, so I noticed last year in '24 it was like 15,000, and then year-to-date this year is only 8,100, but you have 30,000 budgeted. Are we still doing like winter and summer liquid calcium treatments?
So we did not do liquid calcium in the wintertime this year.
Okay.
We will be doing liquid calcium for the gravel roads this summer. So
Do you think
we
it's gonna
haven't
be
expended that yet.
30,000 more?
I don't know. That's my honest answer. Brian, do you have some sense on that? How much, so we didn't use calcium in the wintertime this year?
No, we didn't, it wasn't really cold enough, we didn't have ice at the same time.
So the
What
question,
temperatures we had, we could do it with salt.
so the question she had is, do we think we need to budget 30,000 for calcium, or should we look at reducing that number?
It's hard to guess the weather for next winter.
No, I know, but.
You know, you probably could reduce it by 10,000, probably be safe.
Don't tell Tammy that.
Yeah.
I was like,
You're gonna spend 15 or 18, or probably close to 20 time you get all the gravel roads done. And the 10 that we have left over, that's just we just carry it in the tanks through the winter in case we need it.
just a thought, so.
Is that to keep dust down? Is
Yes.
that why we put it on the road?
That's 100%, well, it's for two reasons, which we just had a class on this yesterday, so I can speak on this.
Is he stealing your thunder again, Amanda?
I would only do that once.
But I was quizzing my husband's family on what I learned yesterday at dinner, so.
So yeah, it does keep the dust down, but it also keeps the gravel together. So it doesn't,
And that's why you'd use it in the wintertime too, then?
no, wintertime's different. It's for.
Winter times help melt the ice. It works at a colder temperature, so if you get down below 0,
Yeah.
the ice, the salt doesn't do anything. It just sort of sits there and just glazes back over again. So the liquid calcium, it reacts with that salt too, but it keeps it wet, so it helps, so it melts it.
Specifically on our dirt roads, correct?
We don't use the calcium on the dirt roads, only on the hot top.
In the winter?
In the winter.
Yep, because
Gotcha.
if you use a lot of calcium on dirt roads in the wintertime, come this time of year, it pulls all the water up to the top of the road, and that's where you get your soft spots from.
Makes it worse. Gotcha.
So once
Didn't
the
notice this
road,
was a learning experience.
once the gravel roads
Thanks,
dry out, at gradient, then you treat them to try and make that, what the work that you did to them last longer. And the road doesn't break down as fast.
So yeah, it's really weather dependent. We
It
don't
is,
know.
it is.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
Mike, I want to circle back to something you said. You mentioned the no more ice on Water Street. You're talking about at the end of Foster Street,
Yep.
right? And you're right, last year that was huge. And when you fix a problem, nobody notices the absence of a problem. Like,
Yeah, that's why I brought it up, because it's
It has
gone
been an
and
issue.
most people,
well, there are things I describe, it's like housekeeping. The only time it's noticed is when it's not done.
yeah.
So this is like, there isn't ice. It's like, well,
Yeah.
that's just normal. So, I mean, I'm glad you did a shout out for that, because that,
Like them.
that's a safety issue.
I mean, I was down there working on the culverts too, don't get me wrong. I was down there in the middle of the night, we shut the road down. I was out there with them, but without their expertise, I'm lost.
Well, nicely done, and thank
Thank you.
you. And you're right, it is
Sure.
too bad that you just don't notice when a problem is gone.
No.
But
Hopefully I'll notice when we get rid of Oak Street.
there's gonna be a party. We will have a street party on Oak Street, the next rainstorm
Yeah.
that doesn't flood.
And then the other thing that you'll to notice on Oak Street coming up, so we had some serious potholes in front of the nail place and whatnot. Got tons of calls and claims for vehicle damage. We patched them every time they were called in, but when you have wet weather, cold weather, you can't get hot top, so you have to use basically a patch. And as the cars run over on it, it just pushes it back out and the pothole comes back. So to try and permanently resolve that issue until Oak Street gets redone by DOT, in the local roads budget, bid that you approved, one of the bid alternates was to pave 300 feet, 3 feet to get rid of that whole strip that had the pothole problem. So that will be resolved as well. So,
This is more of a probably capital improvement question.
yep, I was
But
gonna mention that.
We've got a number of emails and calls and things over the last, couple of months about crosswalks, walkability, and I'm also remembering the comprehensive plan. I'm just wondering where walkability factors into highway and roads, and if there's a.
So, as far as crosswalks, painting crosswalks, every year we have a line striping contract, we'll have somebody coming right up here. Which me and Charlie will have a meeting on that soon. To have all the crosswalks and the arrows and all that stuff painted. But it's, in terms of like actual building more walkability access, I think you're gonna find that that's gonna be covered in, we have two initiatives going on with the DOT. One's the village partnership, and the other one is the Thriving Communities. And those look at that stuff. So it's definitely on the radar, but not specifically in this highway budget, but it is something that's on the radar as part of these efforts that we have going on with the DOT.
I should also note, something Sara brought up at a previous Public Works meeting is there is kind of another method for some of these things where you like laminate onto the roadways for the crosswalks or some of our key areas. It's a little more expensive, but especially to your point, John, like there might be, in a future line striping contract, we might want to go to something like that. These things are pretty much non-existent by this time of year. And there's also in the Econ Dev budget, as a kind of reminder, is we put in some wayfinding signage pieces. It won't necessarily be that, and, fully robust on those things, but, I could see something there as well, just a little more. I know that's been a big issue for a lot of our business owners and people here, just knowing where to go where.
And then, the capital requests are gonna be excavator, which we're gonna have at a later meeting, we'll go over it more, but I'm just, excavator, trench box, snow, replacing a sidewalk plow, because we have two very old ones and they both broke down this winter multiple times. And then sidewalk paver and roller, which is more in tune with like when we build the courthouse road and we do some of this bigger stuff. If you want to save money, you have to spend some money, and so that's what those, and I don't know if they'll come out of capital, we'll discuss it at the capital meeting or whatever, or maybe we look at a band bond or whatever you guys want to do, but they're requested, so.
That would allow you to build sidewalks?
Yep.
That's cool.
And it would also allow us to actually, so right now, if you have, say, your road, right in front of your place, if we wanted to actually do a section of that road, we could do it with a small paver like that. We could never do a big road like High Street or any of those roads, but these smaller side roads and things like that would be super effective for us to be able to actually fix those roads with real pavement and a paver and a roller that are long-lasting, permanent fixes, instead of trying to get out there with the patch machine and have guys shoveling stuff into holes and, using hand compactors to try and compact.
Same with all the big cross trenches that we do.
Yeah.
You'd be able to pave them back in, they'd be actually smooth instead of the little bumps when you try it with a little 24-inch plate compactor, and it just doesn't get it quite as smooth as you want. And it'll save time.
So back to you, John, Thriving Communities and VPI, but that's like 5 years away too.
Right.
So there is a piece of like, maybe we need to look into like, those little reflectors that you can press, for key areas where you're going across Main Street. This is basically a highway with the amount of traffic. And maybe there's probably not enough in like wayfinding we have now on that piece, but let me look into that a little more.
There's also grants you can get for those.
Okay.
To start installing those.
Yeah, let me,
Some good grants.
I think we already have one at the corner with
Yeah,
the
thanks,
grand
Reggie.
that I feel like was a grant that we got.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so if we got another one like down here.
Those were given to us. We put one on Water Street, two in front of Harbor Park last summer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's one there.
I think High Street.
Yeah, I mean, we're perfectly willing to participate in those efforts. We just need to have some direction on how you guys want to go.
Yeah, we're looking at some grants and also just see cost too. If it's something like that for safety and people really need it, these are tough roads to walk around on. Get my running shoes on.
If it's new equipment for building the courthouse infrastructure, may as well use the equipment to its best, highest use.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Get a lot of mileage out of it.
And then we'll talk a little more capital on those pieces. I think there's a lot of use to that sidewalk, another piece, but that's new snowplow or snow blower, I think.
They'll come with both.
Yeah.
Okay, so just because we also have sidewalks around here, like we had some breakdowns, and then, obviously the first priority for the crews when we get those snows is to get the roads clear, and then so the breakdown, they couldn't get the sidewalks, but having the ability to move that stuff around our sidewalks and keep everything walkable, I know is really important. And we want to do a little better job next year on that piece. So very much noted from the citizens. Of course, there were some breakdowns and some other, a lot of snow to deal with, but really want to optimize that next year.
If you just run away, we can't ask any more questions.
We can come up with more.
This, on to the next.
Thank you.
We are moving on.
Are we doing parks, trees, and cemeteries?
You're doing that.
I know. This one kind of gets back to Parks and Rec Director.
Solid
I
waste.
thought we were doing
Oh, solid waste, sorry, solid waste.
We're not doing parks, trees, and cemeteries tonight, are we? No, that's the third.
That's the third.
Sorry, it's in the Public Works section. Sorry, never mind.
That's the third. We're doing
Yeah,
solid
the table
waste.
contents does not go with the.
Solid waste is
Never
on a
mind,
different.
sorry.
No, solid waste is tonight.
Oh, parks and trees on something, yeah, okay.
That's on the.
I'm with you.
That's in the third. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I was going by the,
Driving this train.
Tree warden. Get all set.
can't wait.
By the agenda.
Solid
one.
waste 485.
So for solid waste, solid waste is gonna be a bigger discussion at some point. Tonight, we're not gonna obviously go into that, but one of the highlights I would say for solid waste this year is we were able to hire Dave Soper. Dave is, our transfer station supervisor now. He actually was the manager of the Blue Hill Surrey transfer station, which is a much bigger operation, and so we were very lucky to have him come over. And so, yeah, we're definitely looking at a reimagining of the solid waste situation because the city has been losing money for a long time on this. And so I'm working with Charlie on what makes sense for us. In this budget, Charlie's proposed a $1 increase to the trash stickers. But the other thing that we're looking at is we really need to look at how we're handling our scale. Because the way that the scale works right now, a resident can come in their car with 2 bags of waste, drive over the scale, get weighed, and throw the waste away, and they would get maybe a bill for $1. And we bill them. So they incur a $1 expense, and then we have to send them a bill that's gonna cost the cost of the envelope, the cost of the stamp, the cost of the person. And then, by the way, the late fee on that bill, if they don't pay it, is 1%. So then we would have to send out another notice with $1.01. So it really doesn't make sense. So one of the things that I think
That's awesome.
yeah, so I really would like to have a discussion with the solid waste committee and maybe before the end of this budget cycle, look at either not having residential scale. Because like Dave, come on up, Dave. So Dave was telling me the other day, so can you tell him, Dave, what you were talking to me the other day about with that truck that came in to the transfer station with all those bags?
So, I'm Dave Soper, by the way. The other day, I was trying to pay attention, like, more and more on the scales and stuff, and they came in with like 8 black bags and 4 white bags, which you can stuff 3 or 4 bags, white bags in a black bag, but even if he had 9 bags or 10 bags, it would have been, $30, but he only ended up paying 15. And I've paid attention to a lot more of the trucks, and they're basically getting a 50% cut.
By going over the scale.
By going over the scale,
Instead of using the stickers.
instead of using the stickers, yep.
Well, of course, with stickers, you get somebody picking it up at the end of your driveway, which is
Right.
a huge value add.
And so, just to start trying to reimagine this space, I think 2 things need to happen. The other thing I would point out is our scale price, even for people that bring in a lot of stuff.
And sorry, Mike, if you be on the mic, just.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
The other thing I wanted to bring up is, so if a big truck comes in full of stuff and goes over the scale, they're paying $110 a ton. Well, if you compare that to some other places in the area that use scales, they're paying $185 a ton to go over that scale. So we've never raised our scale price, and we're still charging $110 a ton. So I really just want to work with the solid waste committee, work with Charlie to really start reimagining this space to make it equitable for the city. And, Charlie, I think, has even a bigger vision, which would be if we can reimagine this space to the point where we can become, say, budget neutral, and you could almost treat it like an enterprise account because the user fees would support the operation. We're a long way from that now.
It's supposed to.
Yeah.
It's supposed to.
But we've been taking a beating on it for a long time, and I just don't think we should take a beating on it anymore. So,
Do you think you can get with the solid waste committee sooner rather than later? And
yeah, I just wanted to get a little bit of direction from you guys to see if you're on board with that.
And this is one of the things,
Wow.
the way I put it in the budget, this is when it could go up, like, they came with where they're at, it's kind of directional, like, I want to, this year, take $100,000 off of the expense, increase, it could be $4, I put increase sticker, it could be the small scale kind of practice, maybe there's a minimum, not ending it entirely, but if you're gonna try and use the small scales and you wanna be easy, it's gonna be a 50, and working with the solid waste committee with sort of a direction that in year 1, I wanna see $100,000 in increase in revenue over previous years. But we have a bunch of other things with Casella, we had that big increase, I know, and it was kind of a monopoly, like there was no other bidder, there was no other, so the next time when they come back, I don't want to do this, I'm not looking to get into the trash collection game, but we have talked to Highway about what it would cost to get the truck, adding a person, because if we don't have another option priced out, and Casella, like whatever price they want to charge us, we got to keep doing trash. So I think there's a big reimagining of the space, to your point, Tammy, on what it used to be, at the department request level, which I know isn't really your request, but it's $390,000. That service is costing Mr. and Mrs. Ellsworth around $400,000 to subsidize the rates that people are paying for the trash. To me, there's like, it needs to be, cost neutral, and then it's almost considered an enterprise account. We're not trying to make money really on it, but we shouldn't be at almost $400,000 in cost to all the taxpayers in Ellsworth to subsidize the trash rates, like that needs to be trued up and paying true costs. Personally, that's my opinion, but would love to know. So I put let's do $100,000 in increased revenue there this year. Let's work with the solid waste committee on figuring that out. And then next year, once we have better data, and I should also note that this was one of the really tough ones on year-to-dates and actuals, and looking into previous records, we found that they were charging to the wrong area and categorizing in the wrong type. We found that because we're like, wait, we have the wrong way, and we're like, oh no, actually, they've been doing it wrong for years in the past. So this was one thing where Amanda and Mike probably spent the most time on, and Dave is incredible, one of just an amazing new hire. Learned a lot from him.
Yeah, just to show you really quickly, so typically solid waste hasn't had capital requests that I know of in a long time. So if you look at this sheet where you have we're asking, we'll talk about it during the capital, but for 2 new balers, because we've never replaced the balers we have in recycling, and then work on the, putting the roof on the recycling building is in bad shape, and the building itself isn't insulated. So we're asking for balers, work on that building. This is the debt service that we have for the 2023 and the 2019 bond. And then if you add that on to the expense that we're showing, our revenue projection here was not with Charlie's 100,000 ad, so this is the department level request. You know, we were looking at a $563,000 shortfall if all that went through.
In 1 year.
In 1 year. And so this is why I'm saying, and, you know, Charlie is absolutely correct, and we've had multiple conversations about it. The hauling contract is coming up in June. I really want to talk to the solid waste committee whether it makes sense for us to continue that, because it's gonna go up, and it's gonna go up a bit.
Yeah,
And
I
so,
need to get it scheduled.
yeah,
sooner
we've
rather
priced
than-
out, we've priced out what it would cost to be able to have our own roll-off truck and haul our own containers, and what that would cost. And that would pay itself back in less than 5 years. So, all that will be at another time, another discussion. I don't want to keep bogging us down here, but solid waste committee, that will be the type of stuff that we want to talk about.
Like you said, sooner rather than later.
Yep, so we'll get that, we'll get on that immediately and see if we can get that scheduled.
You are?
I was gonna say,
Like
both of us
excited
are
you
on
have
it,
come
yeah.
back.
Yeah,
Woohoo!
this is great.
I gotta talk some trash.
You guys get all the cool kids.
But any other questions for you guys on solid waste?
Yeah, I have one. When you're looking, I think for perspective, as we hear from people who aren't pleased with the sticker increase, when is the last time it was increased? Anything on the history? Again, I think we have found it handy when we look at fee increases versus inflation, if it's been 10 years.
Yeah, I'd have to look up.
Yeah.
I know, I think I
Pretty
recall you
close to
saying it's been a
10.
long time, so.
Well, you
And
know, even
It's
if we
just a good
save-
perspective check.
Oh, Sarah, just to your point, Nancy, even if we end up saving folks money, all they'll talk about is the dollar increase in the
Well,
tickets.
And I mean, that's human nature. It's a
Yeah.
tangible thing, and I look at it every Monday when I put my stickers out. I get why people,
Yeah,
like, I see that one versus the
My
rest of it
husband
gets
gets the
lumped in.
stickers, and instead of putting it out on Tuesdays, he takes it to the transfer station. I'm like,
What's wrong with that?
Yeah, I do.
Some
So just-
people
the
do
purpose
that.
for the sticker
I
is so you don't have to
sticker-
do that.
Exactly, that's you
The
get it at
piece
the
of
end of your
that
driveway
will-
instead of in your car.
Yeah,
The
Sounds
piece
like a
of-
great
I
guy.
like going to the transfer station.
so does he. I
The
don't
piece
get
of
it.
that may be also effective for us is if we do look at changing our scale policy and what we're doing with the scale, people that are now coming over to the scale and getting the discount will now be buying trash stickers. So we would anticipate seeing an uptick in the revenue we would bring in from people purchasing the trash stickers. So,
And to your point, this is a tough one. This is like, it's kind of hidden the cost, you know, the trash sticker, it's here, and to raise that trash sticker, the convenience of kind of going in and out, like, yeah, it's not gonna make, but it's $500,000 that all of the, and, you know, residents are sort of taking on each year. And in some ways, like, we could just keep doing that, and nobody will even know that this is kind of happening, but it's one of the reasons tax rates going on is this trash thing changed. You know, it's costing wildly more than it was 3 or 4 years ago. We talked about cost centers, like, that's, you know, that's an enormous amount of money that used to be probably in your days, Tammy, cost neutral for trash.
well, the
Yeah, and
solid
some of
waste,
our-
the curbside collection was at 70, and then when they renewed the contract, it went to 208,000.
Yeah,
And
that
then you
was
guys had to
significant.
finance out the increase, so
The
that's a
other,
big piece.
That was just 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah.
the city of Ellsworth is unique too. We have a transfer station and we have curbside pickup. And we're so large that that's why that costs us so much, is because they have such a huge area to
And
pick up.
rural enough that there's only one provider
Correct.
that can offer
So,
that service.
And so anyway, you know, I expect we'll have some robust discussions at the solid waste committee. And then we hopefully can come back with some options that people can get their arms around, and we can start moving forward with this stuff.
I know that the Main Street businesses, and I don't know if this falls under solid waste or if this was back in highway, but the Main Street businesses were asking for more trash cans along Main Street. And I don't know if that's something that's happening and built into these budgets, or if that was.
It would fall under like if it goes on the highway, it'd probably into like a miscellaneous expense item or something like that, where you would just buy a few more trash cans to have out there.
And is that the ones, the trash cans that are on Main Street, is that picked up by this
Nope.
MSW
We
collection?
pick them up right
No, they
away.
pick them up by
Three
the.
times
a week.
3 times a week,
Wednesday, Friday.
Okay,
highway picks them up.
okay, so we already are kind of doing trash pickup already.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I could put that, Tabitha, into kind of my notes on, you know, Parks and Rec Director, you know, beautification, some of those pieces. Then Knowlton Park, that was another complaint on kind of, do we have enough trash cans there? Are we, when that stuff happens, it's, it's just, we're not doing best practices there, and doing a review of those pieces, I think, will be helpful, so.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, water? Thank you, Dave. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, welcome.
Team.
Doing a
Say one
fantastic.
more thing real quick. Like, my only concern is like raising everything. We already have a lot of residents using dumpsters. So if we raise it so high that everybody just, if it's cheaper to get a dumpster than it is stickers and by weight, then we're not gonna get the revenue that you're looking for.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's just another way to look at it, but if you raise it too high. I mean, $5 a bag or $4 a bag, you add that up, and a family with 2 or 3 kids or, a bigger household, it's gonna be cheaper for them to get dumpsters. We took in 220,000 in stickers last year. I divided it by the 8,700 residents. It's only 8 bags per resident. So there's already a lot of people using dumpsters.
Interesting. Or the small scale, and that's kind of the interesting piece about this whole thing, is this is an incredible expense.
There's only 275 scales.
Active
I
users.
clicked on every account that we have. There's only 3,765 accounts, and there's only 275 active accounts using the scale.
I used mine once, and it was so
Yeah.
stupid. I
And the
couldn't
rest
do
of
it
the
again.
people essentially are buying stickers or they got dumpsters.
Right. And I think, with the solid waste committee, so is 100,000 reasonable? Can you get that out of it through increased revenue, through scale changes, through an increased sticker price at the same time? Or does it have to be a much more dramatic change to how we do trash and consider the cost of trash? Because
Yeah, the counterpoint to that would be if more people use dumpsters, that's less coming to the transfer station.
Right.
So less money, less we're hauling out. So I don't know what the offset would be, but that just came into my mind when we were talking about that.
Dumpsters are getting more expensive every year as well.
Yeah.
Same, generally companies that are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
waste or-
my initial pass at this was a $200,000 increase in revenue, because this is just an enormous cost. And I was like, well, that's probably unreasonable, even though this should be a $500,000 increase in revenue. It should be more like an enterprise account. But how do you actually get there and not just push everybody to dumpsters and not increase any revenue? There's probably all kinds of, something for the solid waste committee
The
councilors
other
to
thing,
figure out.
we had a problem with it one time when we raised prices, is people would back up their trucks and have 3 or 4 bags, they'd sticker 2, and then throw the other 2 in while they're at it.
But she's actually noticed that a couple times.
Seriously.
Yep.
And if you're not sitting there watching them through the window, you're not gonna see
Yeah.
it, so
That's-
there's all kinds of stuff people do when the price goes up.
Yeah.
Or it ends up on the side of the road.
Dump it on the side of the road.
Yeah, so it's a big conversation to have, but I think we really need to start looking at it and see how we want to handle it.
Thank you.
So,
As we transition, can I just point out, not every city reimagines this space when it comes to solid waste. I think that's, reimagining this space is a very optimistic way to look at what we have to do.
Yeah, I mean, even this conversation's got me thinking more, do we have to go internal, and just, it is a cost for the city to pick up trash. If you're gonna do curbside, if you're gonna have these pieces, and then you're gonna outsource it and charge stickers and all, like, this is, I don't know, we'll think about it later, but.
Some municipalities make you buy the bags from the municipality.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they make revenue that way.
That was another interesting thing. I think we do give some of the revenue to the businesses that have the stickers. Is that correct?
yeah,
People
so,
that buy them.
yeah, if they come in to buy 1,000 stickers, they buy it for $2.90, and then they sell them for the $3. And so they make, they're,
Big, that's big money.
before my time. I'm just trying to get us back to a better place. That's my
5
intent.
cents when we went from
Yeah.
2 to 3. So.
I have a lot of things going on in a lot of different areas, so we're trying.
All right, water.
Yep. So water,
It's pushing me.
so this is the water, green is, again, decreases, red is increases. All of the brown lines that you see are new lines. And a big piece of the amount of new lines that you see in this budget is because, their miscellaneous expense account budgeting was somewhere around $73,000. And so everything was coming out of the miscellaneous expense line. And then the other lines, you just didn't see them. And so now we've really reduced the miscellaneous expense line. I think we reduced it to 10,000. And then we've created the lines that finance wanted to create as far as legal, printing and advertising and that. And then we standardized the lines that we are trying to standardize through all the budgets as far as professional services, billing, maintenance, and those type of things. And so it's one of the reasons that, you know, we've taken a lot of time to get this budget to this point. With a lot, you know, Amanda's been like my savior in a lot of cases, but Dave, Reggie, Brian, you know, John, all those guys, we've had meetings and we've worked late and just trying to come up with the most accurate budgets that we can and, you know, give the council the best picture of what, you know, we're spending on public works when you guys are looking at your budget, because obviously public works is a huge piece of the overall budget. So as you can see, if we go down through, tuition reimbursement has money in it because we have an employee that is taking college courses relevant to their position. And so as per the personnel ordinance, we are helping to fund those classes for them. And then when you look at professional services, we actually combined 4 lines. Before, that were a total of 94.5, and then we cut it to 50 because based on the actuals that had been spent out of those lines, we didn't feel that it needed to be 94.5. The vehicle and equipment maintenance went down because we were requesting 2 new leases, so if those leases are successful, then, you know, new trucks don't require the maintenance that other, they have 5 pickup trucks at the water.
Yeah, so I did see that you said there were no new requests, but there are requests for 2 new leases for the trucks, right?
Yeah, so so my thing with the requests for those is, I don't know if you guys want us to request those as capital, because they're debt service, and I wasn't clear on how you want.
It's debt service, so it's not capital, but.
Yeah, and so we've kind of tried to list them as a debt service, but when we submitted the capital, they weren't in it, so that was the piece that was dropped on a couple of them.
Yeah.
Because I did the capital, but then I didn't account for the fact that the request for the trucks needed to be included in the new request section, not in the capital section, and I didn't get them there.
Yeah.
They're captured in the line items, but they're not captured on the summary page.
And so, but it doesn't say how much that increase is, or does it?
For,
The leases. Do you have any leases? You have 1 lease now, and you're asking for 2 more, right?
yes. The capital outlay reserve that you see there, so the $112,000 that was in the budget before, I think it's been taken out, but maybe not, but that was actually the capital improvement request from last year. So this is actually a new account that I'm asking to set up in water like we have in wastewater, to start reserving money. And have a reserve account that they can look at, you know, in the future if they have emergencies or they have issues that they need to resolve and they don't necessarily have the money in the operations budget. Like, wastewater's had it, they've had it for many years, and it's built up to a pretty good level. But highway and water don't really have reserve accounts. And so I'm trying to set up reserve accounts.
You don't have any highway truck accounts or anything
We
anymore?
we do in the, but they haven't been contributed to. in many years. Kind of what was left in there in 2020 was what was in there when we uncovered it last cycle. And I think post this conversation too, we do need to revisit, except for wastewater. Wastewater is, I think, 500, 600.
Yeah, I did not ask for the normal reserve amount for wastewater this year because we are at a good level.
Yeah, we're not.
So I didn't put it in the budget this year. But for water and highway, I just really think, you know, it makes sense to start putting money away. Because they have such big stuff that can go wrong. And I know that for highway, the city has a general fund reserve account that they could probably dip into. But the enterprise accounts are not.
Because you have fund balances, that's why.
Yeah, and
You
so.
don't need it, like, you're gonna, according to this budget, you're gonna have a $250,000 fund balance at the end, addition,
For water or wastewater?
water. You're claiming revenue of 1.8 million and your expenses are 1.6.
I got our expenses at 1.75. Too. So I'll have to look at that.
Yours is different than ours. But you don't have reserve accounts and enterprise accounts because you have fund balance.
Right, but, I mean, I guess in the past, we've not always been able to count on the fund balance because a lot of times the projections don't play out.
But it rolls over. It's not like encumbrances, it's a fund balance, so it rolls.
It's supposed to, but if you look at it.
It has to because it's an enterprise account, you can't get into it.
Which I 100% agree with you, but when we went through the war room last year and we started looking at this stuff, that was
Well,
not there.
that's an audit
Yeah.
issue, but I'm saying that's why you don't have separate reserve accounts, because you have fund balance. So you don't need a reserve account because it's in your fund balance. So like the city, when we need something and we haven't budgeted for it, you can take it from fund balance if you don't have reserves. You guys have enterprise accounts, so if you need something big, you've got a fund balance to work with.
Yeah, and so what I'm saying is I don't know where that fund balance is now.
Oh,
Like, I don't know where that's recorded, I don't know that there's any money in the water fund balance, if there is, great.
All right, well, we'll true up this.
Yeah, I can't see it, so I just wanted to.
We'll true up this discrepancy here, and that's, that is an issue, because Mike's been contributing in wastewater enterprise at a
Mike doesn't
$35,000
have
a
a
year.
fund balance because, so
Yes.
his enterprise reserve is specific for, it was part of the agreement for when with the
We built the new
DEP.
plan.
Yeah, that we have to have that, we have to contribute $35,000 towards capital outlay and show it.
Okay.
Specific for that, and that was part of the consent agreement and everything when we built the new plan.
Yeah.
And we received the money, so that's why he does it. If he would have a fund balance if all the departments paid towards the sewer too, but they don't. But that's why he has one. Water department is overseen by the PUC,
Yeah.
and that's a whole different
It's a whole
thing.
different
It's
cycle.
not and they're supposed to.
So if they have fund balance, hallelujah, and that's great, and we can do away with this.
Tammy can explain it better than me because
request.
she's done it.
All I'm saying is I don't know what it is, how much it is, how to identify it, so I wanted to make sure we were trying to be proactive in setting aside funds if we had to. So if we don't need to, that's great, but somebody needs to educate me on where the water fund balance money is and how much it is.
It's not something you would see, the accounting office would be,
Yeah.
finance office would be able to see,
Yeah.
and it's in the audit, so you can look at 2023 audit and it'll show you what it is.
Okay.
Be nice to, once we figure out where and how much that is, to benchmark it against other similar sized municipalities and say
Yeah.
like, are we above what others have? Maybe we can tap into that to
Yeah.
fund some projects.
No, 100%, I mean, yeah, that's the goal, is to, the goal isn't to make money and hoard money, the goal is to cover your operations and your debt service, and then, in his case, so we're looking at asking for a 5% increase on the water rates to be prepared for the new water treatment plant that's coming. And we already have the majority of the funding for it. It's gonna be something in the scale of 20 million or so, plus or minus. And so, we wanted to be proactive, Reggie wanted to be proactive about, starting now with smaller increment increases. So that when that debt service does hit us, which won't be for probably till, I wanna say 27, 28, 29, whenever like it's a year, I believe, after the project is substantially complete is when the first payment hits us. So to be ready for that, we've begun, or Reggie's begun, scaling up the rates at smaller increments instead of having to get it hit with one big increase. The thing that comes into play with that is, like Michelle said, water's in a PUC. And so we can't just raise the rates for water, we have to do a rate case. So we've been talking to, actually, they just had a meeting with Matt Williams, who now in his current position at his new job, that's one of the things that they do. So he's giving us a quote on doing a rate case for us that we can present to the PUC to get them to allow us to do that rate increase and start building that money for the future when that water treatment plant comes.
Isn't there a maximum, you can go up by 1 or
was gonna say,
1.5% without?
So you can
Without
go
a
up-
rate
you-
case.
You can go up by 1.5% without doing a
But we
PUC,
won't get to that.
but you'll be under, yeah, you're still gonna need a big increase by the time that gets.
And there's like two different versions of the rate cases you can go
Yeah.
with. You can go with, I think with 5% is kind of one, and if you want to do a 9 or 10%, you'd have to do another type of rate case.
5 to 7% is one rate case, that's a minor rate case, I think they call it. And then if you do a major rate case, that would be anything over 7%, you're gonna look at doing a major rate case study.
But if you do, for like the next few years anyways, just a smaller one, and then you don't think you can get enough so that you could,
I mean, we talked to Wedin and Kern, and we asked them to try and give us the scenario of what the debt service is gonna look like and when the stuff was gonna hit, and what they would recommend for us to do for increases now to offset the hit that we're gonna take later, and this is the number that came back.
Yeah, I think that would be part of the rate. Ideal world, we don't want to have this big jump when all that debt service comes in. So how do we just keep it like this? And how do we kind of future fund that piece so we can kind of start building up? And then, it's, as opposed to just a big jump when it comes then. So hopefully part of this rate case and working further with Wedin and Kern. I know we did a big presentation with council on that recently. Because we also have to factor in new users on the system, and they had kind of a worst case scenario, which was not great. But
But
as
that
you
was
said,
one of
Michelle,
the-
that's like we have to do it.
But that's one of the pluses that may happen. So when they gave us the recommendations for the rate study, the rate case, and how much the rates should go up, they based it on no growth.
yeah.
So, as we go forward and say the 150 unit comes in, or, we get some stuff around the courthouse, new users come in, none of that's been accounted for. So it may be we go at 5%, and then maybe our growth is enough that we don't have to do a bid. Like, we get there at this pace. And so the hope is that because we're not counting growth into this number, that when the growth happens, it'll be enough of an offset not to have to do a big rate increase at some point.
And as Nancy would say, this is a great reason not to have sprawl. You have it all in within your utility.
Thank you for channeling me, I appreciate it.
It's training us well.
Yeah.
What was that?
She is, she's training us well. yeah.
I'm hoping to. I have a numbers question.
Yep.
I'm looking at water budget, the top row, page 833. And water billings, it's showing a 41% increase, percentage change fiscal year 2026.
Yep, that number is not accurate.
Okay, because that's not 5%.
Right.
Am I right? 5% is not 41%, so.
Good job, Nancy.
Thank you.
All right, so can you, just so I make sure I heard you correctly, can you say that again?
What I'm looking at is for water billings, it's a 41% increase fiscal year 2026 change. The difference, so you're talking a 5% increase, and you're not factoring in growth, so I'm not following.
So the number that we have right now, and that you see there,
I can't see that, so.
is 100, so this number that you have right here was the projection for 25. This number that you see here is what we actually have for actuals, and then we multiplied it by 2 to come here, and then we put the 5% on to get.
So they under budgeted.
Okay, so we're looking at
They
the
dramatically under budgeted last year.
Yeah, that's,
So the fiscal year 2025 year-to-date, you're right, is significantly higher than, than the complete fiscal year 2025 budget. So the budget was skewed
Yeah.
last year.
Yeah.
That answers the question.
And part of that was the transition from Munis to Cassell, some stuff didn't
Right.
get pulled.
Yeah.
And so, but no,
Yeah,
this
so-
is real numbers based on
Okay,
real.
so it's a budget-to-budget comparison, and the budget wasn't right. Thank you.
yeah, that's, I remember that too now, Mike. That's one of the things I love about Mike and Amanda here. Is I was like, what? Oh yeah, this was last year, not exactly the right area, but
Okay.
we will find out, Michelle, too, on that fund balance piece. And if we can not, and then not having the reserves, it's unfortunately because it's an enterprise account, that doesn't mean we're gonna be able to add that to
I
the-
don't, but you've got to be careful, because I'm not sure the PUC allows reserves. Do they, Tam?
I feel like they do.
Do they? I can't remember.
Reservoir.
Reservoirs. I can't remember because,
Good
or
job,
if they
Joe.
do it, they take it into consideration when you do your rate increases. So I can't
Yeah, I-
remember if there's a you just have your fund balance but I can't remember if it's, I can't remember why. You'd have to just look up your PUC regulations.
We'll look it up, we'll see if it's a reserve, or if there's enough fund balance that we don't need the reserve.
Well,
you know.
I looked and it's only like 46,000, which doesn't seem right either,
Doesn't
but
seem
that
right.
is in 2023, so I don't, again, there were lots of issues over the last.
So, yeah, I mean, we'll do whatever needs to be done, whether it's figuring out the fund balance or, starting a reserve account, or we can't start a reserve account, we have to do fund balance. I mean, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to
I can
make
imagine
sure
it's
we started
$46,000.
Well, the budget, the FY
Putting money-
25 budget of 884 versus the actuals, like, that's $400,000, that should be somewhere.
Yep,
Right.
So,
Hey, John,
unless they didn't balance it.
was that your first dad joke? Your first official dad joke?
I think officially, yeah.
The reservoir joke, your first dad
Just
joke?
blacked out, it just came out.
Lack of sleep, that's gonna do it. Well done.
Trying to make Patrick proud.
All right, are we all set with?
I can't
I have
remember.
one,
Oh,
I
you have a
ask
question?
one question. When we were doing that tour, we were talking about the logistics of all those buildings, being the highway or the Public Works Department having all these different buildings, including this office rental that we're doing for Water Department. So is there any plan to incorporate them into a city-owned space?
Yeah, so we'll have a little bit more, it's one of the things actually I need to add to the capital kind of, in the near term that I think we need to address is Pump House Point.
Nate just-
The water department used to be, and now they're paying at the old pay less shoes, I call it the pay less to pay more strategy, where I think we're at 50-some thousand.
56.7.
57, and that's actually not, I talked to the finance team today, that doesn't include the fringe that's in there, so it's actually like 60-some thousand that we're paying every year, and it's enormous, it's way too much space that we have. So that, taking a page out of the school's book on, a lot of leases, can we, and then also hearing from the schools about their buses, and, shouldn't this be at the highway garage, and just needed investments in the highway garage. We're already bursting out of the seams with, to me, that the most likely place is that we need to extend the highway garage to accommodate the water department, because they're using tools together, they're like more of it, and then also bring in Mike and Amanda to be at the highway department, if, as we're building bigger buildings, a couple office spaces to kind of centralize a lot of these pieces, some of the school buses, and feels like that's, should come to the top of the list of the capital start looking into. I also talked to the, let's see, was it Southwest Harbor? I think it was Southwest Harbor. They just did a new highway garage. They got some congressionally directed spending. That was like in the 3 or,
Back when that existed.
Yeah.
they were in the previous year's one. So
We're
they-
gonna tour Bar Harbor too coming up.
Yeah, they were actually, well, lucky, or they were in the previous year's congressionally directed spending one, so that one didn't get touched. That's what, I think she said that was like 3.2 million for that expansion addition. Then we were at the Katy National Parks headquarters. They just did a $30 million new, basically, highway garage. But LEED certified, this, that, and the other thing. So I was trying to kind of, they were under construction there. That's something I think we need to move towards, both for our own current spending on it, plus the school spending on it. I think it makes sense, there's enough space as the current highway department for it, but I think that's kind of a next big step with the,
And we do have, there's a space that's become available for $2,000 a month that we may be able to relocate to in the interim. That would save us quite a bit of money. So we're gonna go look at it.
Is it a little bit closer?
Yeah, and I don't wanna get into too much details because we wanna look at it before somebody else looks at it. But if it makes sense for us, I'll bring it to you and, see what you guys think. But, that's another thing that we're trying to work on, to try and reduce costs and get us into a better space and things like that, so. Does anybody have any, and by the way, Nate and Ashley have weighed in, and yes, water can have a reserve account according to the PUC, and it can be 10 to 20%. So just for food for thought.
Above and beyond their fund balance?
I don't know, they just told me it, so I'll have to look into it, but capital reserve accounts are allowed at the PUC.
Yeah, okay.
looking at that, and I don't know if that's in addition to the rate case and where we're at, and fund balance, it just cannot be used to kind of also fund future, the potential to reduce that potential rate increase too.
Water does have capital requests. I don't know if you guys want to talk about them tonight, but he has 4 things requested. One of the things that's also in the wastewater highway is a new camera inspection system that the 3 departments would split, which I'll talk about in the wastewater section. A skid steer for the water plant, HDPE pipe welding machine to be able to fuse together lengths of HDPE pipe. And then possibly putting a standby generator at the Dollar Hill standpipe because it doesn't have one. So those are in his capital requests.
And we're just gonna, I did bring a sheet just in general and some capital request stuff. I think we'll talk some scheduling on when we'll get more detail. We're still waiting to get the memos and bring those people that could be experts there, but the water, wastewater pieces are enterprise accounts, so aren't necessarily connected to the new mill rate, but, for consideration there.
That's why I'm mentioning them just tonight, because the CIP night is gonna be a lot of general fund stuff and not so much enterprise stuff, so I just wanna make sure you guys understand that the request is there for the enterprise accounts.
But if we end up pulling it out, we'll have to just kind of pull it out of this budget. It won't save funds, or we keep it in and it just stays here.
Any other questions on water? I'm trying to stay into my deadline. So if you guys have questions, fire, but other than that, I'm moving. All right, so.
Wastewater.
Wastewater, near and dear to my heart. So this is the wastewater
813.
appropriation. So for wastewater, same thing, red is increases, green is decreases. And then the tan is the new budget lines. So for the increases, you're really looking at vehicle maintenance, because now we have the loader from highway is full-time down at wastewater, so I bumped up the vehicle maintenance line. Then if you look at the insurances line, that increases because we combined 3 insurance lines into 1 insurance line. The 2 increases that are decent increases, which you're gonna see for plant chemicals and plant lab supplies. So when we get our new permit, currently we only do chlorination and fecal sampling seasonally from April to October. All of the new permits across the state are now going to have year-round chlorination, year-round fecal coliform testing, and they're adding enteric oxide testing to all the permits as well. And so I didn't include them in last year's budget because permits right now are taking several years to turn around. We submitted, I believe, in 2020 for renewal. We haven't received yet, something along that line, but it's coming. And when we had our last inspection, one of the permit writers came to the plant and toured the plant to see what they were permitting, so I know it's coming. And so I just wanted to capture additional funds for the year-round chemical feed and capture additional funds for the year-round lab testing that we're gonna be required to do by permit. We don't have a choice in that matter. Human resources, so the lines that involve human resources, so main state retirement, workers' compensation, the Flores, that's all determined by, you know, what employees are participating in for benefits and things like that. So that's the numbers that were given to us from human resources. We don't really have a part to play in that. The other thing I would point out about the wastewater budget, so this budget, the payroll and some of the other things that are in this budget include a wastewater superintendent position. Obviously, I am the wastewater superintendent and the public works director, and I would anticipate hopefully being that for the next year. But at some point, that's probably gonna change. And so I leave it to you guys how you wanna handle that as well. I didn't wanna take it out of all that money out of the budget for like a 1 year, whatever that cycle ends up being, and then having to put it all back in at some point down the road. When you know, if I get to a point where I can't be both and I have to just focus on one, then you're gonna have to hire a superintendent. The reason I can do it right now is because I have a really good crew and I have an experienced chief operator that knows everything about the plant. He's been there for 30+ years. But I don't know when he's gonna retire. He's in his 60s. So this is direction I'm asking from you guys as to how you wanna handle this, because it's I am carrying it in the budget, but we're not gonna expend that funds unless something happens to me. We're not gonna expend those funds for the superintendent. So, just putting that out there for you guys to figure out how you wanna play that.
Well, that's up to Charlie. That's his purview.
Okay.
As far as the superintendent and making a recommendation, because he oversees staff.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
that would be a discussion you guys would have, and then a recommendation from.
My thoughts on this was that we should pull it from the wastewater budget, and if we had to have an increase and a big addition later on, then we'll do that, but we're likely to be here for the next year is an enterprise account. There are substantial reserves in this area if we had to do it kind of on an emergency basis and pull in from the reserves. But yeah, just kind of wanted to think about that. Are we budgeting? Yeah, I think one of the questions I think I had for you and Michelle and Tim was just like, he is the wastewater superintendent, but he's also public works director, but we're doing a third, and a third of his public works director, but it's the wastewater, I don't know. To me, there was like just a weirdness of that, that he's kind of holding two roles, but he has the public works salary. But maybe we just, I'll work with I think we can just reduce that one by the amount of the salary. There already is a third going over there to the other piece, so. Yeah.
I do have a question, and have we ever gone back to look at annually how much wastewater is not being charged to the city for all of its buildings in the school department?
I think that's awesome that you asked that question.
Yes,
Well,
we
you know
have.
what, because here's the thing, if we're being dinged by, all of a sudden, by the credit companies for our credit rating, and the reason is because it looks like the wastewater department is losing money, we ought to be able to record in somewhere that how much is actually, should be charged to the city, since this is an enterprise fund, and how much money you're actually making in the wastewater department. Even if it's just an exercise right now for us, and not actually raising it by taxation, but let's have that exercise and see how much it is, so we can kind of stop some of the.
Yep, so, a couple of things. The depreciation number may go down significantly this year in the audit, because last year, Ron told me that if we were able to get a condition assessment done on the wastewater facilities and forward that to him, that they would recognize that.
I think that, yeah.
I'm
Yep.
just-
That
I'm
should have
just-
just been simple depreciation, you don't need,
Yeah,
you know.
but, I
it's
mean,
fine.
I'm just,
It's fine, but.
that's what he wanted, so that's what we did.
But I really think it would be offset if we had, because it's every municipal building.
Yeah,
So
it's
schools and
it's
everything.
probably
That's gotta be
on
a
the order of
huge number.
$25,000 a year we're losing, something like that.
Easy, easy.
I thought I calculated one time and it was like 400,000.
Yeah, it's way more than 20, because you've got to figure,
The high school, HCTC, the middle school, City Hall, the police department, Avery Lane, Cherokee, none of those people pay sewer.
yeah,
And so part of this budget that you're seeing, and me and Charlie have had this discussion, is, you know, we pay the financial department $18,000, now we're gonna pay the IT department $12,000 in this budget. And now we're looking at possibly in future budgets paying for HR services and all that. It's only equitable that the city pay the sewer service that we're providing,
and the schools and everything, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
so.
But I think it would be nice even for this year, so we could have it in the budget, just if you, I mean, just take the annual usage times your rate and.
mhm.
Just take the water.
Just to
and-
have something to
Yeah,
show.
it's pretty, it
that-
should be.
Just take the water and then,
Exact, that's what I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
just take the
map-
water meter.
map it over to Sara.
And let's
That's
see
they-
how much that
That's how they
is.
do it anyway.
Michelle, I'm all for that. I think that's great. Are they paying, we learned the other night, schools are paying for water. Do the other municipal buildings pay for water as
Yep.
well?
We all
Yep.
pay for water.
yeah, it's
Just
PUC
not
reg.
sewer. Okay.
Yeah,
We pay for water and we pay for the public water supply for the hydrants.
yeah.
Okay.
So this is just me talking wastewater now, I'm not advocating
Yep, I'm just trying to understand
Yeah.
how the pieces fit together.
just.
And it's just
for-
because it's a PUC regulation.
Okay.
It's just the differences, and so, but it would be nice to know,
We'll get the number,
We'll
and
get that number for you.
it's one of those pieces that maybe we have to talk about at the beginning of the budget cycle next year. It's kind of a change, is like, yeah, what city council? There's been many before, who wants to put a $400,000 increase into the city budget?
Right.
And, you know, and raise the tax rate, or, you know, and what, that's what it'll have to be.
It
But
is.
it's kind of like,
I don't think it'll be that big, but it's gonna be a big number.
it's kind of like
It was
the,
over a 5-year period.
solid waste, like, we are paying it. We have a wastewater department at the ratepayer, but just like in solid waste, it's kind of the converse of solid waste, actually. Whereas solid waste, everybody's picking up the tab for the trash users to have a subsidized rate. This is kind of the opposite. The enterprise account users that are using service are subsidizing the city, which gets it back by charging everybody else, the ratepayers, more.
Right, and it's not all residents who are the ratepayers. It sounds like it's a bigger question
it's
you're
just-
gonna be looking at it with, but it's how the enterprise operations interact with the city use of those. So
Yeah, I mean, I have
just to
no
understand
issue
it all.
with us, you know, taking care of the cost that we incur as a department, as an enterprise fund for finance. They do our AP, IT does, I'm not
Right.
debating that in any way, shape, or mean. I'm just saying, like, if we're gonna go down the path of, like, this year, it's probably $170,000 coming out of my wastewater budget to the general fund for IT, for finance, and for the public works administration piece, which is actually gonna go down, but if then you start talking about HR, and it gets to be a bigger piece of the pie, then to me, the equitable thing would be to, okay, if we're gonna pay for services rendered, we should get paid for our services that we render.
It just- And I'm not asking to do anything with the budget, please. I just want to know,
Sure.
I just would like to know what that number is, so that we can look at
Yep.
the enterprise fund truly.
Yeah, and it's one of the things, nice having Mike and Carrie in our HR department on a lot of these pieces, and it's just, you know, we're still playing a little bit of cleanup here. We also recently uncovered that, not to push back again, Mike, on this piece, that they were budgeting for employee benefits, but the city was just paying all the employee benefits for wastewater and water, and wasn't
Which I had
getting,
no idea was that.
wasn't getting a reimbursement from wastewater and water. So there's been multiple years where we're just paying for all the employee benefits out of the general fund for water, wastewater, and their enterprise accounts. We were actually double budgeting for it. They were still budgeting for it, they were just never actually sending the money over to our side. So we've ended that this will be the first year in a very long time that that's happening too.
I don't send no money, by the way. That's not me.
The money wasn't being transferred, how's that?
Yes. So, but anyway, so wastewater, is in really good shape. I do have a 1% increase in there because We have the High Street Pump Station project coming up, which is funded, but after that, we're already working on the dewatering project. So I just want to make sure we can offset any matching funds that we need, because that's a $3 million project that we haven't even started the financing for, other than the initial grant money we received for engineering. And so no, wastewater is in really good shape financially right now. The reserve accounts are in really good shape right now, so I cut the 35,000 contribution that we've been doing for the reserve account. The only thing that I'm asking in capital this year are to pay for the sewer inspection camera. And the reason I'm doing that is because you guys thankfully funded the combination vac jetter truck. So typically, every year, Vortex would come up, do the vac jetter on the third of the sewer system, and then they would camera a third of the sewer system.
So we must have another one of these, because you do have the 35,000 in here.
Yeah, so I said we were gonna cut it, but I guess I just didn't make it into the book yet.
Yeah.
But in this budget, it's not in there.
You know how much is in that reserve? Must be around 400,000 now?
Yep. That's quite a bit. And so,
Well, it isn't if something goes, but.
yep, yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So we were paying Vortex $42,000, I think was the last bill we paid them to come up and camera and jet a third of the sewer system. So now we've paid we're buying the back truck, so we can do the vac and jetting ourselves. But we don't have a sewer inspection camera to do the inspection piece of it now, because the one we did have went bad a long time ago. And so when you look at that, highway, like we paid Vortex like $90,000 last year to come up and do the culvert inspections as part of the drainage project. That's money that we paid out for that. So these things that I'm asking for pay themselves back in a very short time frame. And then the other piece that I have in the capital is just paying 20% of the excavator and the trench box that are being asked for as part of the capital for the highway department. I didn't ask for any other capital other than those things, unless you count the pickup truck. So I do have a request for the F-150. I don't know if you guys remember the picture of the F-150 last year with the ripped up seats and all that stuff.
Yeah,
We're still driving that.
It's embarrassing.
And so, we were hoping to include it when we did the pickup truck leases we did in December for the highway department and the fire and the police. It didn't get in, so I'm asking that we do it in this budget cycle.
As a lease as well, or?
And this was kind of next on the list.
That would be capital, or?
I don't know how you guys want to do that. I mean, it's a debt service, it's really not capital, because we're not gonna own that asset.
No, that should be in,
So it's a debt service.
Yeah, in the-
I have it listed in the appropriations as a truck lease, as an expense in the appropriations. I don't have it in the capital.
that's where it should be, in the wastewater actual budget.
Okay. All right, any other questions for Mike? You're done, Mike.
See? I am capable of getting done.
Soft claps for Mike.
Incredible.
In only 2 hours. That's not bad.
A lot of soft
still got
claps.
Jim,
Okay. And I'm sorry,
We
Jim.
got facilities, sorry, Jim.
I should have put you first. That was a miss.
That's
I would sing Jim's praises enough, but I think we've been singing Jim's praises.
Yeah, yes.
Everyone's head
I
together.
saw him in the.
Evening all, Jim McLean Facilities. So first of all, I want to thank Charlie, Sara, Ashley, and Nate for all the help they gave me this year for preparing the budget. I was running a little short on time this year. Just want to recap some of the projects that we completed this year. We have completed the fire department power upgrade that broke up the circuits to the fire trucks, so they're no longer kicking breakers that ran the onboard air pump. So when they got a call, if a breaker kicked, they didn't know it, and so they'd had a delay waiting for the air brakes to pump up. So that was done, and it was done under budget considerably. Again, the lead paint and the moisture remediation issue down in the fire department, that's been completed. All the lead paint that we found has been remediated, been restudded, spray foamed, sheet rocked, painted. The windows that we've long been awaiting, been holding on to for 2 years, scheduled to be, start the install 1st of April. So that's for the fire department. We've got the snow guards put on the roof this year on the 2 danger areas, one above the fire department and the other out back above the public entrance areas. The radio tower maintenance issues that were denoted back in 2020, I think it was, have been completed. The moderate to high issues were done for a little under budget, actually. I think we budgeted 20 grand in the capital for that, and it came in at just under 19. The new door and lock has been installed out front as part of the security upgrade. We no longer have issues with anybody hanging between the doors at night, and people have to step over people in the morning when they come to work. And the clerk's count is done. You all know about that. And then I guess I'll move on to the big issue with the ask for, where it's part of the budget, whether or not we continue with our current contractor, go back out to bid, or hire a second person to do cleaning for the city, what we currently contract out. So currently, we contract out here at City Hall. We contract out for the PD. We contract out for the public bathrooms seasonally, about 20 weeks a year at Knowlton, the Harbor, and DeMeyer's Fields. So for total of that, the 3 bathrooms is $13,600. That's the current contract. It's been extended once already. And the PD is $600 a week. City Hall is $425 a week. So when you add those 3 numbers up, it comes up to $66,900. Part of my research was I picked a number of $50,000, went to payroll and said, what's the cost to the city in addition to a $50,000 salary? Their response was, if a employee took single subscriber insurance, plus all the other benefits, it's $18,000 a year for a total of $68,000 with a $50,000 salary. If the employee took full family, it's $33,000 a year for a total of $83,000. So my question tonight, I know Charlie has recommendations. I'm not advocating either way. I'm just looking for some direction as to whether or not we re-advertise and recontract for a new cleaner to clean City Hall, which I would change because the current contractor does a great job for what they're contracted for, but they're only contracted to sweep, mop, clean the bathrooms, and empty the trash. It was kind of a stopgap back when I first was hired, and it kind of fell through the cracks as a couple of years went by. And I really think the amount of traffic that City Hall gets, citizens, dignitaries, that sort. We really need to have more time spent at City Hall. It currently takes the contractor, they clean 3 times a week, 3 to 5 hours for the week. As compared to the PD, I think he's working 15 hours a week over there, and they have substantially less traffic. One thing to note, if we put it out to bid again and go with another contractor, it is cheaper dollar-wise. If we hire an employee, there is some substantial hours available for other things throughout the course of the year besides cleaning. There's 20 weeks that they'll be busy doing the bathroom seasonally. After that, if we can find the right person, they can assist me with the small jobs, inspections, painting, changing light bulbs, fill in disposables, whatever, maybe we could find another me and and send him off to do stuff that I do. So, I guess, because Charlie added into the budget, assuming that you were going to approve a second person, so that's why I brought this up first, for you all to kind of make a decision or hash it over and give me an idea one way or the other, because I would either like to have a new bid spec and put out the bid so we have a new contractor on hand July 1, or start interviewing and have a second person on staff by July 1. One thing to consider, I think Sean Willie brought up, their current contractor is awesome. He does a fabulous job at the PD. They don't want to lose him. I would love to be able to see him be the second person, but I don't know if he would take the pay cut. He's an independent contractor. He does a fabulous job. He would do a fabulous job here. He was more than interested in putting a bid in as a new contractor, if you all opt to go that route. Questions, comments, statement?
Yeah, I'll just say on the this was originally, and it was even in the printed copy, was a managed recommendation no at first when, I didn't want to have any additional full-time employees this year except for Parks and Rec Director. That was sort of my guidance to staff. In addition, we need to make this a leaner year. But it's also been a big complaint of staff and others about just the cleanliness of this building and the bathrooms and I even got some pushback from other staff on just there might be here. But really when Jim and Sara kind of got together and put it in, to me, this became a recommend on just, we either need to go this route or we need to add more hours to City Hall, or we need to pull less into the police department and more to City Hall. The fact that we're doing 3 hours a week here and 12 hours a week at the police department is just it should be inverted. We have so much traffic here, and you see it. There's a dusting. This is not a deep clean that happens, 3 hours a week at City Hall. This is a dusting, bathrooms, a quick vacuum, and that's, so we either need to, if we're gonna get up to the 12 hours a week and the other pieces, it's probably gonna be a lot more expensive. But when you just do the hours, you see on the memo here, so for an additional 21,000, and this is budgeting benefits, and that's all in here. We're getting an extra 2,000, or we're getting 2,080 hours compared to the 1,100 of cleaning hours that we're getting now. So to me, it kind of went from a no, and then I looked at the memo and to, this seems to be, if we're gonna add one employee, that this would be and I think this is the way City Hall used to have a janitorial person, is what I've been told in the past. So it seems like maybe we're competing with more Airbnb type things as well. To try to contract more to get up to these hours is probably going to exceed the 22,000, which includes benefits. That's the all-in cost here at a 50,000 base. So.
Plus, this person will be able to help you with things other than cleaning.
Correct, yeah. And the 3 hours is not a contract amount. It's a ballpark about what it takes them to fulfill the contract obligations here at City Hall. It takes them about an hour and a half, hour, 15 minutes a night to do what they're contracted to do. The public bathrooms seasonally, maybe a half an hour, 45 minutes, because again, it's just sweep, clean the stalls, clean the toilets, sink, empty the trash, fill the disposables. So it's pretty quick. So it's doable, I think. One person can do that, I believe, the right person. One of the concerns that the PD has is that if we hire somebody, or even if we go out contract again, they need to be able to pass a background check and security training to be able to access the PD. When they hired their current contractor, I know Sean told me that they had some difficulty with personnel they interviewed to do the job because they couldn't pass a background check. So I told Sean that I would mention, I think he mentioned it during the PD.
He did.
But I told him I'd reiterate it again tonight for you all, just so you have all the facts, hopefully make an informed decision. Again, if we put it out to bid again, financially, it's a little cheaper than if we hire a staff member, but I think probably the return on having a second staff member would be a benefit to the city as a whole because of that extra time available in the wintertime, fall, off-season, and possibly even during the season, during the week. I mean, it may have, a couple of, they'd be able to spend 3 or 4 hours here at City Hall every day cleaning. I think whoever does it is gonna spend an immense amount of time the first few weeks getting it up to snuff, but after that, maintenance type of the cleanliness will be far less time. Again, janitorial service is not my forte, so I can't tell you exactly how long it takes to do a building, but.
If we went and hired a new person, would there be the need to get a new vehicle, given the places that they would need to go and?
Right. I thought about that, and I had a brief conversation with Charlie, saying something about we were gonna be getting a small fleet of electric vehicles for code and some other, I think like 3 electric vehicles, if that could have been just hearsay, but I assume that maybe one of those vehicles might be available. If not, I think I might be able to work a deal with somebody to get one of the trade-ins when they swap off for lease vehicles this year. That's something to get by for a year.
Yeah, it's a great.
Something more permanent. I mean, can't have everything all at once.
It's a great point, Tabitha, and let me think about that for a second. I should say it's only one right now, and it's because it was a crazy.
I thought you said 3.
It was a whole fleet.
It's a whole fleet. And I
We
should
would
also
have electric dump trucks.
should also remind folks that when we did the leasing round, we did the cost effectiveness, and it was not cost effective to go to the first round to the electric, so I stayed with the gas. To me, it's the dollar figure, and then for the code vehicle, which is a little different, it was like 20 grand off the price. So that's why we went with that one. Whether it's gas or whether it's electric, it's going to be the cost that kind of drives that. And I had thought with some of the other pieces, like with these types of vehicles, not as take-homes, but as just, we want to get our use out of them too. So how do we, and I was thinking with code, sometimes we're using them a lot, sometimes we're not using them as much in the wintertime. Is there a system we could have of like kind of checking out the vehicle, or is there like a shared vehicle that's here that there's a checkout system for, to like maximize the use of that vehicle at all, as opposed to having them assigned to a specific person? That's another.
We did that when I was in New York City. We had a fleet of vehicles that we would sign up for, so that they do it in municipalities.
Do you have a vehicle now that you use when you're going all around? Or you
Yeah,
just-
I have, what's her name? The old Public Works Director's pickup. Lisa.
You shouldn't have sold that van, Jim.
Hmm?
Shouldn't have sold that van last year. Everybody's.
Yeah. I ran out of candy, so I had to get rid of it.
Oh, jeez. So, Jim.
That's all I heard every time I got in that thing.
Oh, my God.
One of the driving factors of getting away from that, no.
Do you do the shoveling for the snow and stuff as well?
I do,
Okay, so you'd have somebody for backup and help with that as well, so, and to.
possibly, yeah. Yep.
Remove it quicker.
Yeah, it takes me about 5 hours to do City Hall and the sidewalk, and then I go over to the Erkey building and do that. If I remember, the stairs down below the lower parking lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of hardworking people in this building, but
Yeah, there is.
there's sometimes where it's just, you come there, it's done, it's like, oh my gosh, and then he did the counters, and then he helped on this budget, and, yeah, so having another person so
I
that.
think it makes a lot of sense to have another person. I don't know how you do it, honestly. Even
Nights and
with just
weekends.
3 days, yeah, I was gonna say.
Hint, hint, like raise.
Yeah, and there's just so many things with stuff with Milton Park, stuff, other pieces, it's just Jim. And so I'm just, I feel oftentimes bad that I've got to call Jim,
You'd never come out with a shovel.
No, I don't.
Bad.
We called Jim.
I called in the delay, so I didn't have to come in at 3 in the morning to shovel for 8 o'clock.
There we go.
We'll hear from Recreation Commission on the 3rd, I think, and one of the things they'll say is a concern about increasing the cleaning of those toilets as well. So there's definitely need for something above and beyond what the current
Yeah.
services are offering.
So currently, the 3 public bathrooms, the Harbor Park and Knowlton Park, are cleaned 7 days a week. She goes over about 6:30 in the morning, between 6 and 6:30. I verified that many times through people complaining that the dirty, and justifiably so, because of the volume at Knowlton Park. By noontime, the place is trashed.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've been up there many times doing different things, and rightfully so. The bathrooms are part of the playground for some of the children up there, so they really get messed up. So having a full-time person would be a benefit, because, you know, if they got time, they could run around and hit Knowlton twice every day, because it, you know, 15, 20 minutes, and it's just up the street, so that sort of thing, with the heavy use places.
I like it.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, moving on. So, again, first account, payroll.
Jim, are we
Charlie,
on to miscellaneous properties?
You wanna do miscellaneous properties, or do you wanna?
I think he's still on City Hall budget.
You're still on City Hall.
Oh,
so-
Yeah, did you wanna go down through the budget lines? I mean, there's really no
No.
change
No, but there's
from
no
last
change.
year,
No.
other than Charlie cut out my training, and I can't get educated, I'm just gonna be poor old fat
There's
guy.
a lot
at
of
it.
loose talk around here.
That's good. So-
But he did add in for a second guy on the assumption that a second guy would fly. A second person, sorry,
Can I
excuse me.
make a comment, though? When we in finance received Jim's budget, the employee appreciation line that we have, he zeroed it out and he goes, I don't need that.
Well, it's just me.
Yeah, he goes, it's
What
just
am I gonna do,
me.
appreciate myself? Doesn't sound quite right, but.
I think, did we put that back in? Yeah, well, you might have somebody, so.
We put it back.
You might-
Finance put it back in.
Again, like I said, everything, he added in printing and advertising, so I, instead of, I think the clerks, years past or forever, have always paid any kind of advertising that dealt with facilities. Not that I have a lot, but apparently I will this year. We do have some when we put out for bid for different projects and things like that, so he's kind of breaking it out so we can really track the expenses for the facilities department. Really, that's about it. Again, the maintenance line went down just because we separated out the cost of the cleaning contractor and put it in its own separate category, which is funded with 0. We added a new line this year for storage. That's for the city seal, when we finally get it removed, so that we have a place to store it in a climate-controlled area until such a time that somebody decides what we're gonna do with it. We are gaining ground on that front. I talked to Sergeant Wilmont the other day, the PD. He's the one that's doing the 3D scan. He's the PD's drone pilot and accident reconstructionist, and he's pretty confident that his program can do what the University of Maine is looking for. But until that point, that he completes that and the university gives me the okay, I don't want to remove that seal because it needs to be in place to do that 3D scan so that the university can do their 3D printing magic to replicate the seal, and we can replace it with a composite type thing.
Will we give that seal, do you think, like to the State of Maine Museum, or do something like that with it afterwards?
The Historical Preservation Committee has had some conversations about it. I don't think anybody's really decided definite where it's gonna go, other than storage at this point.
I was wondering if like the high school or something would have some wall big enough to.
The
Do
library.
you know how big that is? Massive.
Those
Those
are
men are
streetlights
as tall as I
probably.
am.
It's
Yeah, but it's like the
28 feet.
streetlights. You look at it up there, but then you get it. face level, it's probably,
It's huge when you get up there.
28 feet wide and 16 feet tall.
Oh, yeah.
Or 26 feet, I think it was.
Yeah. It's meant, but when they took it down the first time and we had the whole thing redone, the men are almost as tall as I am.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah,
just
they're
unbelievable.
five some.
5-something, yeah.
It's 13 pieces
Oh.
that's through bolted into the wall with 4 layers of brick into the gable, into the attic up overhead.
That's massive.
Why are we taking it down and having it redone with this, I feel like the composite wood's gonna last a lot longer.
Yeah,
Right?
it's
It's falling apart.
bad.
It's falling off.
Parts of it are being
This
held
is
on by
wood,
the gold
yes.
leaf paint.
Oh, okay.
as an outdoor wood item, it's just,
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
you know,
It's
you all,
done.
they redid it the last time, and it's just, it's,
Yeah.
That was a good 20 years ago.
I think it was 1988. I think it was 88 that they redid the seal.
No, I was, no.
No? I've read the newspaper article on it.
Yeah, I didn't come till 95. It was after,
Was
I
after
was
that?
part of that project.
Yeah, Michelle's quoted their newspaper articles from back then when we were doing the original research.
Yeah.
And there's like 24 karat gold
Yeah.
leaf on it,
24 karat
so,
gold, Craftsman in Rockland
yeah.
took care of that.
Hey, we could scrape it down, maybe we could reduce
I
it.
was just gonna say.
And then he came back.
Price
he
of
came
gold is
back-
very high.
He came back again and did something too, because when they brought the rollers in, it's when we had the dents in the brick.
Yeah, they had, because when I went up there a couple of times to fix the Ellsworth City Hall sign, and I used the tow behind lift, because it's a lot lighter.
Yeah.
Still tore up the grass over there, but I didn't tell the lawnmower guys that I did it. I tried to fix it some this last time.
Jim,
It's a beautiful seal.
I have a question. You mentioned the Historic Preservation Commission. Have we gotten permission to put the 3D printed version
We haven't even gotten that far
up?
yet.
Okay, so it's just getting it down and
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah, we're still in the works.
Yeah.
We had a discussion last year. We met, Tom, myself, Matt, a couple other individuals that I don't recall, and we Zoomed with the university and their composites lab people.
Yeah, I remember that.
Some people on the commission wanted to restore it and put it back, which really, in my opinion, there's no restoring it to,
Right, the
it'd be-
photo,
it
the
would be
photos that
replacing it.
show it's dry rot. I mean,
oh, bad.
Yeah.
Bad, and the lower parts of it are just mulch.
Yeah.
They're like these windowsills out here, you can
Yeah.
just kinda, just the paint's holding it together some places. So,
okay, so the future of it is unknown, but getting it down,
Yep.
you know, to your point before it
And
falls
we'll
over.
Force totally.
and once we get that triggered, I think we're gonna have, obviously, it's an iconic piece of Ellsworth. We're gonna have to probably have a council discussion, others, and like, in the meantime, you know, as it goes down, we gotta, you know, what do we do? There's sometimes when they're doing renovations to building, they'll screen print like a version of that, and we can put that up there in the meantime to have something, or do we just live with the brick and kind of put a timeline, but it's gonna be a big change.
Yep.
There was conversation with one of the ladies on the commission that she wanted to be able to look at the backside because there was something she was researching. She thought it was part of FDR's New Deal, hiring a sculptor to build that or to fabricate that seal. So she was interested to know if it was signed on the back, and I said, you know, it's, 2 inches off the wall, I can't tell you that, but she's pretty sure that this sculptor, he did several that the federal government paid back during the, kind of historical.
When we redid it, though, that might be not there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But she was pretty sure that, there was no
Because
monies.
it's all new gold leaf and everything. It was all replaced, everything was replaced.
It would make sense, though, that big painting that's outside my office. Also,
That was from the Smithsonian.
yeah, Works Progress Administration, I think it used to be at the post office right here, what is now the Emmaus Center. So similar time frame probably was.
Anything
Thank you
else
for that.
It's on facilities? Okay, so we're on to miscellaneous properties. Milton Park. Got increased for?
Yeah, to your point, John, on facilities maintenance, trash cans, a lot of the, public complaints from last year really felt like we need a bigger investment in that area. It may need, I think there's gonna be a larger kind of plan that we need to put together. I think a Parks and Rec director, that'll be kind of top of the list. I had thought when we, looking at the unspent surplus funds on TIF this year, and then with the debt service falling, additional TIF, could we tag that with TIF funding? I know, Tammy, we've had some conversations, but I've been kind of thinking we need to kind of fund at a maintenance level here. There's a few things that are definitely for TIF, but we've got it in this to have a full TIF plan that maybe you can fund. My druthers would have a significant portion of that start to go to Knowlton Park and the marina and some of our bigger assets. But in the near term, putting some additional funding into that park to kind of get such a used facility, probably our most in the city. But then also, could I pull this 50 off and use TIF for it instead in the unspent from this year, or do we need to kind of wait? I don't know, Tammy, that one's, because there was a Knowlton Park debt service, right? So we could.
have some, some of it was for the walking trails through
Knowlton Park, so this kind of thing could be.
Charlie, there's also the dedicated revenues. Remember we found buckets for I forget the name of the playground at the time, but.
Jump.
All those.
Yeah, there's the jump playground in
Jump, that was
the in the reserve account for
Did
the.
we use that to replace the slide and stuff?
No, so
Didn't use it?
Well,
We had this discussion at the rec commission yesterday morning, and there's a big lack of knowledge about, Melinda Workman remembers that there's $100,000 in the jump fund, and where is it, and we're not sure. But I think the bigger thing was like,
There was never $100,000.
It's 25,000. We just pulled up the reserve funding with Bar Harbor. And to me, there's like it's one of the things, I think Parks and Rec director having a little more.
that was the big thing, was where do these live, and
Yeah, this is kind of in facilities, Knowlton Park, but then so there's like consolidating a lot of these budgets, having that piece, and then potentially pulling out that 25,000 and having more of a larger facilities reserve fund or kind of capital projects reserve fund that we can kind of go off of, as opposed to each of these pieces that didn't necessarily go back in, but.
And there was never $100,000 left over in that, because there was jump 1, jump 2, and then the new playground that we have now, all of that, and then Knowlton Park. So I think,
It's
those were
20
all
it's 20.
fundraised, so I did the city, I don't think that there was ever that much, we didn't have that much left over.
So as we're looking at the budget, is it possible, you're looking at TIF money, but also at these separate accounts, to be able to invest the $50,000, but not have it come out of the general budget?
So that's a discussion we're gonna have to have later, because Tammy?
I'm also fine with saying that's a bigger conversation.
It's a
but
much bigger
Is it
conversation.
a conversation we can have within the context of this
Thanks,
budget
Mike.
cycle?
Yes.
That's enough for me to know if we can make sure that we've got that, so that we are using money. We just keep finding.
To me, and
There's
that's,
deferred maintenance, but there's also buckets that have sat that we could have been using.
to me, there's kind of two areas of this. One is like the things that we've been using TIF funding for in the past, that are
Yeah.
like a lot of the consultant things we talked about, that are economic development related, that are like, hey, like, let's use those. Let me go back to this budget and just use them because they're one-to-one, partly in this budget, partly in the next one, that we're 100% confident on, that it's totally in line with where we're at. We've been using similar type funding in the past. And then something like this, maybe let me do a little more work with Tammy and Michelle are there pieces like this that could be, because the jump playground piece, like that could be used for jump playground type pieces, but not for trash cans, to be brought around, or these pieces, so.
But like replacing slides and adding on to the jump playground and stuff, that's exactly what that's for. It's for maintenance.
So to me, there's like that piece, like let's get another piece in there, and there should be a full plan to start replacing or adding a piece. All those, I think Eric was mentioning, those are all reaching their kind of lifespan, so.
but there is some funds in the rec request for this year as well that look like they're doubling up with this line that could then come out and should come out.
Yeah.
Can we have and I know I've got it somewhere, but just at the next meeting, have the reserves.
Sure.
So that we know what.
I know we've looked at them before.
Yeah,
And it was astonishing, so.
Yeah.
If we can start
Yeah, and-
taking action related to that.
Yeah, there's, absolutely, and I think you know, as we look towards encumbering this year and for the first time in a while, and, you know, what to do. I know we talked last cycle a little bit about some of my ideas for potentially consolidating that, potentially kind of some areas like jump and playgrounds, like maybe we just put that in there and consider more of a larger facilities reserve.
Yeah.
So happy to, Ashley, if you could make a note, just so I don't forget here.
And then, can I also ask, and Mike's already gone, but SK Whiting Park needs some work. It's, you can't even read, those are memorial bricks. People put those bricks in memory of people. You can't read them anymore because they're so covered in moss and stuff.
Kale went up there and pressure washed all that last year.
I was gonna say, I went up and sat there late summer
must
last
have
year,
been.
because we had talked about it.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
'cause
you brought it up early
Yeah.
last spring, and
I was.
when Adam was here, he had, was it Kale? or-
Remember that?
Caleb.
Yep.
So Caleb was running around with the pressure washer from the wastewater's pressure washer, cleaned the memorials up at Knowlton, SK Whiting. I think he did a couple other
Okay.
places too.
Must have been after I was up there, because I went up there last summer and I was just like, oh.
It
let's do
was,
like that.
it was, yeah, it was summertime at some point that he did it.
Okay.
I don't remember.
That's good,
the
because I
date,
was just
but-
like,
Yeah, you're right, it was all black and
Yeah.
molded over, and when I went up last year when he was doing it, he did a great job, it cleaned up really nice.
Yeah, so we'll take, and I tried to get to parks, trees, and cemeteries today, but I do have an increased request there as well for, you know, and we did cancel a vendor last year because, you know, we were halfway through the season into July, late July, and didn't want to pay for mulching for 2 months instead of, you know, it should be in May. So we've saved a little money here, but, you know, we got a lot of public ways. High Street's getting redone. We're doing a lot of things. Our public ways, our parks, our other pieces really, you know, they deserve some TLC. We got tons of complaints about it. I really want to make sure that this year, you know, that's done right, so.
And that's a good point. We talk about people are gonna see an increase in their dump sticker. They're also gonna see investments we make in the places that are around.
Yep.
So it's worth doing. It's relatively small money with a big impact, I think, so I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, huge impact. We all heard it last year, and let's make a difference on it, so. And roads, too. I mean, it's a lot of new roads.
Well, we can probably take 13,000 and change out of Knowlton if we're going with the janitorial staffer. Or wasn't that?
I don't know about 13,000.
13 came out all three.
We could probably do.
So
yeah,
it's $280 Knowlton is $280 a week, and that would figure to 280 times 20.
Yeah, it's
5,600.
Yeah, and it's in the memo here on
Damn, I
each
didn't
one,
quite
so.
get to 10,000.
To your point, John, yeah.
Oh,
we
it's
could-
already in there.
Yeah, the memo has 5,600 on Knowlton, 24 on DeMeyer's, 56 on Harbor, so, sounds like council is, so I'll just kind of lock that in as a council recommendation, and then, yeah, I might have to have some further conversations with Tim and some of the Knowlton Park pieces, but maybe pull back my 50,000 request a bit. I'll send along the reserve accounting, but, maybe put it back to 25,000 and see if we can, you know, I feel like a lot of that, the surplus TIF funding, you know, and we can also edit the TIF request for, and there is beautification in there, streetscape, other types of things, so let me just dial in on if we could maybe make that 0 and do that all right now and be confirmed about it, or if that has to wait until a little later.
And a couple things pertaining to Knowlton. When we had the Game Time do the inspection of the playground last year, so we purchased all the equipment that was denoted as high risk, like the suspension bridge and all that. That's sitting up at Highway. I think it was $8,000, not counting the slide. I think the rec committee decided that just blocking off that center slide is broken was fine for the time being. I contacted Chad White. He is, as of last week, he was having a medical procedure done. As soon as he's done and up and going, he'll give me a date where he's gonna come and do the installs, which should be done before, you know, I open the bathrooms Memorial Weekend, is my hopes. and another tick towards Nolan Park for next week in the capital improvements. I put in a request to resurface the splash pad this year, with a polyaspartic coating, I think is how you pronounce it. It's the same stuff that we use downstairs in the fire department, in the bathrooms, in the back bedroom. It's a way better surface. The concrete's really corroded, for lack of a better term, up there now. It's very porous. So the water, as it sits on it, it gets black and stained. And I pressure wash it, looks okay for a week, and then it's back to this way with this polyaspartic. You can just go up there with a mop and bleach water.
Is it less slippery too?
It's about the same. The quote that I got is with a quartz aggregate in it, making it a non-slip surface. So it would be about the same as if we just painted it again like it was before. Problem with paint is every time I pressure wash it, some of the paint comes off.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then that
It's a
would
popular place.
Yeah.
it would beautify that place up immensely, just recoating the splash pad, just the splash pad circle part.
Yeah.
But that's next week. Okay, I kind of jumped out of line, sorry. Miscellaneous expense is the same. We keep that just for, as it says, miscellaneous expenses for miscellaneous properties, something that comes up that we have no budget for, such as if the tax collector forecloses on a piece of property and we need to change the locks on it, or board up windows, or secure the property, or last year, code condemned a place, and I went over and sealed it up so that people weren't hanging out in there. It was a vacant property that windows were all broke out of and stuff like that. That's what we use that budget for. Thankfully, this year, we haven't, I don't think we've used any of it this year. If we have, it's been very little, but it's a stopgap. Pump House Point Building is a new line. I guess I've kind of taken control of that building. So the $5,000 is to pay for the heat, the electricity, and minimal maintenance until you decide what we're gonna do with that building, like if we get a broken window, or the door blows in because the wood's all rotten, or something like that.
That's a water department asset, and it's insured by the water department's on their list of assets, so I don't feel like the
water
city
department.
should, I think that the water department should pay for that.
Okay, well.
That's just mine.
They'd have to pay for the heat again, because I'm paying for the heat now out of
Oh.
facilities, because they said they don't need to heat it. I utilize part of it as a workshop.
Yeah, those
Oh,
kind of
you
things,
do?
the water, that's why. So Jim's utilizing it down there. We were kind of thinking
They've kind of
that's,
vacated it, other than they store a compressor, and they're slowly cleaning the junk out of it, from decades of.
yeah,
So you're using it though now?
I'm using what used to be Reggie's office, the office area, as a wood shop.
it's storing all of our fire department windows for downstairs.
Yeah, we got, like, the speed sign for the PD stashed in there in the off-season, and
Okay.
that's about it, really, nothing, but at this point. I think water department puts a boat in there in the summertime, sometimes.
Charge them rent.
So I couldn't remember, but I think we did try to keep it in their budget.
Well, I mean, they need to keep it going, because they've got water going in there, which is running water, so I guess they don't need to heat it because it's running, to keep the pipes flushed at that end of town so they don't get rusted up in your tap water. So they keep a constant flow going to keep that from getting stained up, but do we need to change the asset listing to the city from the water department, or does it make a difference, or?
No, but you might want to just make sure that the insurance gets switched over to us.
Right, rather than,
I got it.
thanks, sir.
So that's what that line's for. Simmons Pond property, which is basically the fire police department training site. They kind of kicked that over to me as well, and that amount is to pay for heat, electricity. I think there's a porta potty up there that's pumped out once a month that the city owns, and we only have to pay to have it pumped. I did have to go up this year and change the circulator pump on the furnace, because There's no service agreement with anybody that I know of, and nobody seems to know about it. So, yeah, that, nobody's taking care of the heating systems for I don't know how long up there. So I've taken that over to kind of keep an eye on the water pressure in the boiler. This is what happened to the circulator pump. It's not a, they don't have a continuous water system up there. They do have a spigot, but they don't have any kind of like a domesticated water system where they can keep constant water pressure to the boiler. So we have to monitor that every few months to make sure that it has the correct water pressure in the boiler, or else it shuts the boiler down for a little water. But the circulator pump keeps calling for heat. It burned up the circulator pump. So, again, I've taken that over, keeping an eye on that. The other building is a Modine propane wall unit. They're simple, easy. The Moore property, we actually, Nate and Ashley, I think, and Charlie found a line that had $19,000 in it or something like that. So we opted to zero balance that line and use that $19,000 that's already been sitting on the book somewhere.
I don't remember this.
You don't remember this? 19,742. 10,640, 52,600.
On the Moore property.
Yeah, we don't know why it was budgeted for, but.
Yeah. Oh, hey, Nate.
It's God
It is the
That-
voice from
God,
above
God, that
again.
you? That you, God?
Standing right behind you, Jim.
I don't think God- I thought I felt the hand of God on my shoulder.
Those
He's
are,
always there with you, Joe.
those are to pay for the, like, the life safety inspections.
So the
and-
Moore Center is currently in the red for this year because of issues that we had. But yes, it pays for inspections, it pays for any breakages that I think by the previous contract or the contract that we're still going by, anything over $5,000, the city's on the hook for.
That's individually, not not,
Correct.
yeah.
Yeah, it's an individual account, like.
No, yeah, so.
An individual occurrence.
Occurrence,
Yes.
right.
Like today, I got notified that one of the compressors on the roof units died, and the second one they think is dead. They're waiting for the full diagnostics from the company that they contract with to take care of the HVAC system, to certify that the second unit compressor is dead and to a cost to replace both of them. My guess is you're gonna be looking at $6,000 to $8,000. That's us. Yeah. We did do some renovations up there this year. We were paying $360 a month for 3 phone lines for the alarm systems. I invested $1,500, got 2 of them changed over to cellular for a fee of $500 a year. Instead of, now we pay, 1 line is for the elevator, that's $95 a month. It has to be hardwired because there's no cellular, statute doesn't allow for cellular coverage on an elevator. But the 2 alarm systems, I got them swapped over, so it's only costing us $500 a year now for that instead of $180 a month.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, it was the alarm company. They said, you can do this. I said, well, why aren't we doing this? Knowlton property we covered. The Kobe fiber building is Jason mostly, unless something goes wrong and he calls me. North Ellsworth Tower, again, we budgeted $3,000, or I asked for $3,000 because we are separating the expenses from IT to the property itself, so that is for propane for the generator, electricity, and any kind of small maintenance items that come up. One word of thought, next year probably, I gotta talk to Jason, but the gen set up there is using oil. I put a quart in it about every 2 to 3 months. And that's when it's just running on a 20-minute-a-week test, unless the power goes out. But, I've put, I think, 2 quarts in it since I started checking it in the last year and a half or so. SK Whiting Park, same thing. We over budgeted or overspent this year because somebody didn't like when the sprinkler system come on after the company came and opened it up. So they charged us again to come back out and change the timers. So I increased that a little bit, or asked for an increase just in case. That covers winterization and the opening of the sprinkler system, covers the grass treatment, and when I replaced the flag, any kind of maintenance to the clock, that sort of thing. The Moore Community Center, we covered that. That's at 52,600, where the guy in the box found that $19,000, Nate. We planned on using that. And then the second thing, I requested DeMeyer's Field as part of the Recreation Committee, the maintenance line, but I felt that I should put something in just because that is the money that I use to winterize Knowlton Park, the bathrooms, I take care of that building, paper products, the janitorial service portion of DeMeyer's Field. We did some fence repair last year that came out of that line. I think that's it. Electricity. There's no heat. That's about it. Questions? I think I run out of stuff.
No, as you can
Understand,
see,
Charlie?
No, as you can see, it's a lot. I know we've Parks and Rec and these pieces and how they kind of track over, and I think in addition to Jim getting some more help on the cleaning of these areas and pieces, but also potentially the rec director being able to partner with him on a lot of the administrative work. Like, I don't know how he keeps doing all these pieces and figuring out the cell phone and figuring out this and then icing here at early in the morning, and and not a lot of complaints. So thank you, Jim.
Not a lot of
It's a good
complaints.
thing you two work together, you'd never see him.
But you need to know that when he's in here early, I am too. Just
Well, there's complaints from Sue.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Well, that concludes this piece. I do want to just talk briefly about a couple other kind of scheduling items. And Nate, if you could bring up the new mill calculator.
Ashley's gonna bring it up for you.
If Ashley could bring it up. And, I know we talked with the school department a lot about kind of like how we go to next steps here now that their number's in. I think I apologize. I don't think I anticipate when we brought the schedule forward to align our processes more with the school, that kind of the school coming in with their number mid-cycle, kind of what that does to the decision tree. Like, we almost, I think in the future year, we need to be at like a council recommendation level and the school, and then we have like 2 or 3 weeks between that time and when they would need to vote on things, so that you all can see kind of the final area where we're at. So I know I've talked to Tammy, the finance team. We're thinking in terms of scheduling out the kind of final sessions here. We have, next week, we have the nonprofits and the social services coming in. They'll do their pieces, and then also at the front end of that, we added a special based on the main organics conversation, that, we'll be re-updating that memo and sending it out to you. We've been working with Redmond Winchell based on the conversation here on edits and changes you want to then. So the top end of that, we'll start with that conversation. We also, because of the High Street DOT project that you guys have heard about it a few times, but Mike's got the not the hubcaps, whatever the whatever the things for manhole covers.
Wow.
Personal.
That's awesome.
Which we actually talked about the week before. I remember watching that before I even arrived. So glad that project's going forward. We'll have a brief then. We'll do those other pieces, and then we're kind of the 10th was our next kind of scheduled time to have kind of a wrap up, start a council conversation about like the council request. Here's where we're at. Where I'd bring, the potential larger, newer requests if we felt like we could go down more, or where we needed to be, really talking with Amy and kind of looking at the request from last time around. It really, I think, makes sense. The school board is amenable to kind of pushing back their date from approving the budget on the 8th of April to the 15th, which would give us the time to kind of bring the school back on the 10th, which is that kind of final timeframe. We should be at a council final recommendation by then as well, so we can kind of, you all had some questions for Amy. I think she has some of those pieces. As she mentioned, she's also still redlining down to see, we talked about some of the lease stuff today on, can that $90,000 for the 2 vans that they want, can we connect her to our lease people and maybe drop the budget in year 1 a little bit there as well. But I'm looking towards maybe on that Wednesday, the 9th. I feel like we need 2 meetings, if we can add one on the 9th to do our, here's where we're at, and I'll talk about overall where we're at now, but here's where we're at, following the meeting on the 3rd, following all the red lines and edits you all have had, that we can come back in here with Ashley to go over the general edits, me to kind of talk about, here was the new request, if we want to bring some of these off, or, some of the new requests that I turned down. I turned down a police officer, I turned down some other pieces that, you all may, seeing this number that we're at, may feel like, having heard the department head recommendations, and I know you all have your own notes, so really taking probably the 9th, that Wednesday, to dial it in, and then hopefully on the 10th, and plus capital, I think on the 9th too. Once we see our final number, we can decide what's appropriate to bring in for the final capital. And then on Thursday, the 10th, should be a quicker meeting. If we feel like the 9th, there was a ton of edits and a ton of, we're still not where we need to be, it could be a longer meeting, but that Amy and myself would be here, really is kind of, this is the final. And then they can go the next week on the 15th to do their recommendation, and then the 21st, we come back as a council for our meeting and ideally confirm as well. So that, big thank you to Amy and their board for being amenable to pushing back their deadline by a week. But I feel like that's something that, without having to push dates back or printing for the vote stuff and change things around, that I think that we can get there by then.
I can't make the 9th. but-
Can't make the 9th, okay.
There's 6
Can you do the
other-
8th?
I could do the 8th.
Let's do the 8th.
Okay, we'll do the 8th.
Well, is
See if
is
the
on the
8th
school board, are they here or do they?
Well, they're changing their meeting from the 8th to the 15th, so I would assume
Oh,
that
you
they're.
just said that. I'm a little tired.
Come on, Tammy, we've only been like 40.
This meeting.
Okay, so I think I'll double confirm with Amy tonight, but I think, yeah, that that'll be the 15th. We'll do the 8th and the 10th. And then, so to kind of give you where we're at, I know we put together this little calculator as well. I've still got some red line to do based on the TIF and some of these other changes, and I'm going to keep making those adjustments. We also still have the police union negotiations, which that number, may or may not come in by this time. I think we should be pretty close to being able to move forward. That we could also consider that in the overlay if we felt like that needed to be accommodated then. Or because it's the city side also, I think we could do a supplemental, because it's not the school side. We could come back and we're not actually moving until the budget doesn't go later. I would assume we could do a supplemental in the police as well if we needed to come back and edit.
Yeah, I mean, if it's soon, we don't have to vote on the budget until June anyway, if we don't want to, if we still have some other things that we're waiting on.
It's just the school side that we need to be comfortable with, and to your point, we should be pretty final, but if that police, we need to change it up till June, we can. Which is the nice thing about being final in April, and why, like TIF, some of these other pieces, let's take a little more time to do those right. And TIF, we could also, doesn't even have to be necessarily in this cycle. So, with the teams, thank you to the department heads, everybody. We started with let me see a 10% cut exercise with the department heads. We knew we had some 2 really big years. My goal was inflation, 2.9% last year. I don't want to be, above that. I feel like so we really tried to make it as limited of a cut as possible with limited FTE requests. Currently, on the municipal side of things, we're at about a 0.2% increase. At 11,676,588 and then the school is at a 6.9% increase at 15,682 with a total appropriation of 27 million. And with that, if this was today and we're moving forward, that equals out to a 3.9% increase in the levy. And again, Steve, as we were talking about, like the valuation, that and the mill rate, like those things, but to me, like the key piece is the levy, and that's in your background analysis. It's like the dollar the dollar figure that we're adding per year is at 3.9.
And is that including the county?
I believe it does include the county. Nate, can you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the county number is in there, right? The new number?
That's
Yes.
correct, yeah.
It's under municipal?
Yeah, it's in the, I think it's actually in your overview. It's not in this calculation, but we could add that in here into the calculator so you can see that.
Yeah, because that's part of the levy too.
Right.
So if that number's not in there, it's more than,
Oh, that's in the budget. Is it in this calculator too, Nate, or is that something we're missing? That's a good point.
I don't think it's in the calculator.
It's in the budget. That might be a miss in the calculator. Oh, here's Nate.
It is part of the municipal number.
Yay.
We have it in the budget.
That was the right answer.
all right, thank you, Nate.
You didn't clock it out, Tammy. All right, good. That's good to hear. So 3.9%. The other thing, like, if there was if you keep rolling down a little bit, if Nate, or Ashley, if you could roll down, sorry, no worries. So we have kind of what that would be for your $100,000 property owner all the way down to your $2 million property owner. So for, if you have a house that's worth $400,000, assessed value, not market value, your property taxes are going from $9,640 to $9,841 at a 3.9% levy increase. Is this the one that includes the 5% valuation change, which is sort of Larry's estimate at this time? So.
Yes, it does.
So what is the percent increase in taxes, given the 3.9 and the 5%?
Well, it kind of depends on the valuation. So if you take a 0% increase in tax, could we do the 0%? Can you plug that in if you just?
So Nancy, if we do the 5% increase, then your mill rate
I don't think
will
we
go
have
down.
that in here actually to do.
Okay, because the overall number is the same. Got it.
Right.
You
Nate,
want to change?
the valuation to just 0 instead of including the 5% increase.
There's like
So
some
18,
helpful YouTube videos.
so B
Cartoons.
18.
Where?
Yeah, we used to have I thought we had a
It's
valuation.
more-
Sorry, Nate.
It's more
There
simple
is-
than.
The assessment where it says
Assessment
1 point,
is-
yeah, B
I want a new
18.
word.
So make it the
Oh, right.
actual for 2025.
Right, make that 1.5, yeah. Okay, and this should have changed all this. So this would be the equivalent of 3.9% increase in the budget, and with no mill rate change,
Okay.
everybody gets a 3.9% because the valuation stayed exactly the same. So that would change, go back to the 400,000. So now it's, 9,640 to 9,841.
I don't think anything.
I don't think anything changed either. Maybe press enter?
Because it's the same either way. Because your mill rate goes down and makes up for the 3.9. You've got
Oh,
a
right, and then your other
3.9.
one goes, I
You're
did
still
that.
raising
Yeah,
27.
You're doing the
Sorry.
same thing, you're just taking it from two different places.
Taking it from
Everyone
two-
gets a 3.9% increase.
The only difference is if some property values go up, are assessed higher in certain areas than other property values.
No,
are
thi-
assessed.
this-
5% isn't across the board.
If you do a 5% valuation increase, your $800,000 property should have is it gonna be more than 3.9%?
It's already more to,
Like if you hold no zero
didn't we
valuation.
just do that
If
before
you-
though? Yeah.
So if you're above the
now we're-
median line, you pay a little bit more, and if you're below it,
You pay a little less, yeah.
do you know that?
But that's
do
the
you know
same
answer?
way, that's the same way though if your assessment doesn't change. It's the same thing.
Okay.
A $400,000 house is, they're gonna pay, they're already paying more because of more of the percentage.
Right.
Right, if you hold, when we had this before, it was if you have a 0% increase in the valuation and, and then you hold, and you add 3.9% in the levy, the mill goes up, and then,
Right.
Yeah, so they pay a higher
81.
they pay a higher percentage of the total.
Right.
Not a higher percentage of the percentage.
And that happens. The mill just went to
That's what I'm
17.81.
saying, and so the percentage stays the
Yes.
same. It's just that
Yep, so the
3.9% of 400,000 is a lot more than 3.9% of 200,000, but they're still paying 3.9%.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's tracking when you do that change
Right,
down
you
to
can
the tax
expect an
bill.
increase.
They're gonna have an
At the
increase, but
same
their
percentage.
increase is the same, it's just the dollar amount is more because 3.9% is more 400,000 than it is of 200,000.
Right.
But do valuations change equally across the board, or can they be applied to certain areas?
Or is it
Not without
residential
having
versus
to-
commercial? Does
Right, with a
someone-
5% valuation increase on a, it's across the board.
It's across the board.
So yeah, on the Walmart level property, that dollar figure is gonna be
Okay.
bigger than,
The percentage stays the same, it's the dollar amount.
so essentially, the valuation actually is progressive in terms of the total dollar figure that it's pulling to acquire, to cover this increase. Whereas, a valuation staying the same or decreasing would make more of the dollar figure fall on lower income, or lower property value, I shouldn't say income. But either way, if we go back up to the top, we also kind of have this calculator on. So if you take, we're kind of trying to redline here, but we'll have potential, so if you try to take negative, 200,000 or 100,000 out, and take 100,000 off of the school as well, and we're both able to, then it gets down to around a 3.2% change. So, benchmarking to try to get to 2.9, that's inflation. That to me is a pretty reasonable rate. I know, Michelle, I know that's a little arbitrary, but as we talked before, and in some ways it's.
Yeah, I know, I don't like arbitrary, I hate arbitrary, but it's also, like, you're basing it on inflation, so at least we have something, some area that we're basing, that number on, and we're not just saying, let's do 2.9. Doesn't that sound like a good number?
Yeah.
Hate that. But
Yeah.
2.9 is the inflation, and then we can go from there, and something to work off of.
The other was the graph that you showed us the other night about trying to get back to that standard growth curve that
Yes.
we had been on, or the average anyway.
Yeah.
And to your point, Steve, I think you made before, so you looked at this kind of your own tax bill over the years, and if it was just the last 2-3 years, you're like, what's going on? But then you pull it back, and so to me, and you kind of mentioned you want to see, let's not go back to zero.
Well, yeah, I mean, and, $50 average per year for 10 years obviously was the wrong average. It should have maybe been $110 per year, or what have you. The consistency, I think, presents trust.
Yeah.
And this wobbling number is management by crisis.
Right.
Or no management at all.
And no management at all.
So,
Well, right, I mean, but the consistency, because obviously $50 a year average was the wrong number, and I said that from the beginning, that maybe it should have been 100 or 110 or whatever, so that it's balanced.
I think-
And I have,
So, yeah, so, I'm sorry, but I think so much of that, it comes from arbitrary numbers. Because they're like, this year, we're not gonna raise taxes at all. And so you put things off,
yeah.
they gotta be done.
Like the
So the
road.
next year, you double it, and it's just not, it's like you're saying, it's a wrong number, it was not managing.
Yep, we had the strategy.
Right.
earlier this evening, and I know everyone's tired, and I asked about the valuations, and it sounded like we really didn't have a number, and then you just said there's an estimate of 5%. So is that estimate of 5% that you just threw out, you mentioned Larry had estimated that. Earlier in the evening, you said that there was a bigger conversation about that. Can that change?
Yeah, it can change, and council can kind of decide, and that's kind of why we're trying to set this up too, as an introduction to see how it changes people's tax bills.
But Larry had felt 5%.
5% was what he's thinking this year.
Last year was, as I recall.
That's what I think too.
Last year's actually, it was 7.5, and the previous year was 6.7. And there's kind of and I think we'll get into this more with Larry too, and we saw the hockey stick on valuation growth in the city on, a $600 million increase from about $1.1 billion to $1.6 billion, $500 million. And there is kind of without the state forcing a revaluation, that's kind of one of the reasons that we try to keep up with that. And we're not at that level now, but we'll talk about that more of like, what's the threshold we're at now? What triggers a revaluation? How much do we want to keep up with this? I had some conversations with Tammy Michelle. I was trying to figure this out more on just getting more explanation of what's new growth, what's not, how is the state doing this, having a much more robust conversation with all the counselors.
So is the 5% the across the board that he wants to do everybody in order to keep up with the state plus growth?
I don't know the
Because I
answer.
would say that 7.5, we had a 5% across the board last year, and then the other 2.5 is growth.
Maybe that, it's
Yeah.
tracking here as a 7.5, but all,
Yeah, 7.5 is the 5% across the board and 2.5% growth.
plus the growth. And I don't know if that's
And I
five.
think that that's what he's talking about now, Steve, is 5% across the board plus growth, which
Yeah.
will reduce the mill rate even more.
Right, and that's kind of the levy's gonna be the levy. To me, that's the most important thing, is like, that is the $% figure. And then the other piece, we can talk about as a council, to how we want to distribute that and if we want to keep up.
So you may want to Steve's point, just ask him, I mean, I know that it's not April 1st yet, and he probably is not going to have a really good idea, but with code enforcement and everything, he's got to know if we've had new buildings, new taxable property, that will be on top of the 5%, and we can have a closer view of that.
Okay. I'll follow up with Larry and kind of get there. So, I feel like we're close. We're at 3.9% now in total growth and total increase. I'd like to be at 2.9%. We were at, just for, I know we did this in the first round when I did the historical analysis, but the year before I arrived here, FY 2024, that was 16.8% increase, a $3.6 million jump. So, and then last year, we sort of slowed the rate of increase to a 7.1% increase, but still, that's, and then plus the valuation change. So that really, so this year, our internal target with our teams has been that kind of inflation, that 2.9%. The school's coming in at about a 6.9%. We're coming in now at a 0.2. We'll kind of keep monitoring that where we're at, and then still, but that last meeting, once we're locked in with all the other pieces, have some options for you all on, hey, obviously, we've been through the whole process, department heads have defended their budgets, I've made recommendations, and council can decide if that levy percent, once we're at the final area, if you think it's too low and we need to add that police officer, or we need to add that additional firefighter and, kind of clear the decks on making them fully staffed, or the other end, the firefighter you did recommend, or the dispatcher being a full-time dispatcher like this, we can't have those FTEs. Or it doesn't sound like the janitor piece, that's why I was originally no additional, but I saw that's a $22,000 delta. We won't get a lot of cost savings there.
When we did the quick exercise of 100,000 deducted from both, is it incorrect to think about TIF in a way that's like, if we just figure out how to spend $2,000 of TIF to replace things where TIF fits out of the budget instead? Is that the same way of thinking about this to get the percentage down?
So there's kind of two pieces of this, and that's kind of my final redlining now that we've talked about TIF, now that I'm a little more like, okay, the 170,000 unused surplus from this year, which I'm going to talk about at the April meeting. I think we might want to reallocate that and putting it on the agenda. And looking to next year, I think there's some of like the consulting things for TIF itself, for ordinance review, for SIP planning, for some other pieces that I had put in the regular budget that are very much in line with things we've used TIF funding for in the past. And also will encourage for that economic development. So that's my kind of first pass, is to clear out those things. We just talked about some of them with Knowlton. That really are one-to-one. However, like the spirit of the TIF is really to promote additional economic development, not to decrease current spending or there. So new spending, I would put that 100% in that category. If there's anything that could be more in that TIF with the unspent funds, that's very much in line with how we viewed it previously. I'm going to do a pass and probably talk with some council members. And we have a person with the state too that we can, Tina TIF, a lot of Tammy TIF, Tina TIF, a lot of T's. And obviously Jeremy's been working on this a lot too, on kind of the categories to pull off that I really feel like are defensible. We could maybe use some of that for some staffing pieces too. But then there's like a separate area of, what's not 100% usable that's already in this budget, that could expand recreation, expand investments in Knowlton Park, expand investments in the parklet, expand investments in the harbor, potential road funding, the track, other big capital projects, debt service on some of those items that really need a little more time, that for us to all consider, that I'll kind of put a pin in that. So it's sort of keep a maintenance budget very clear to where we're now. I think they're, roughly around 100,000, I think I can put into that category. And the other ones, or if it's a little gray area, we don't have to spend the TIF now. It's not necessarily tied to this budget cycle. Let's take a little more time on how we really invest that money in the city. Especially seeing where we're at now. If we were at a 7% increase, I'd be like, we're doing, and we're pulling a lot more into that area, so.
If we're getting ready to wrap up, I don't recall if we gave the school board and the superintendent direction, but I look at, without the adjustments, the city is at a 0.2% change, and the school is at 6.9. And that doesn't gel for me. In all the presentations, there's been nothing where I've wanted to roll my eyes because it's a ridiculous proposal. Everybody has made sound proposals. It's just the reality that we're in. But I look at 6.9% of a larger portion, and we're almost at 60-40, versus 2% for the municipal budget. And I'm struggling with 6.9% for the school. And I understand the value of public education, that's not the point. But if we're shooting for 2.9 overall and the school is at 6.9, I'm struggling with it. And yes, the population gets to validate with the validation vote. We can say, well, if the city wants it, they'll vote for it. But that discrepancy is striking. And that's what I'm going to be pondering.
Say it louder for the people in the back.
No, I won't.
I don't know who's pointing to who, but go for it, Steve.
I'd like to second that comment. I've been sitting here looking at that number and looking at that number. And at one point, it was about a 50-50 split. And it seems to be tilting the other way now. I think, and Tammy, you could speak a little better. At one point, I think that it was a 50-50 split. And here we are with one that's almost flat and one that's 7% increase. So I'd just like to second that point and that 60-40 business that you're talking about. And that also leads to something Michelle said in the last couple of years, is that when you commit to the school budget, then the makeup comes on the municipal side. And it looks like over time that the makeup has been on the municipal side right along.
Yeah, and Steve, so in your budget analysis, it has a history of the mill rate, share of the mill rate back to 2009. And the school oftentimes is the bigger portion historically. There was some, but and also in the school's defense in this piece too, that's one of the reasons I did this cost center analysis, like this huge bump, what's going on? I was kind of expecting the school to drive an enormous part of by a 3-4x. But it was much more mixed. I think there was like an underinvestment in the schools, it seems like, looking at this for a significant period of time. And, and public safety investments over the last 5 years kind of matched the school growth, so even just those two departments are pretty close to like the 5-year increase, just in police and fire and dispatch, to what the entirety of the school system has done. So I do feel like there's actually some catching up that the school is still doing in here, as much as I like.
Yeah, they're still one of the lowest per pupil we have that graph too. I mean,
And they had to make up their whole fund balance a couple of years ago.
yeah,
that
so
was
I mean,
clearly
yes,
depleted.
and, Charlie's put the city municipal side through a pretty serious cost-cutting regiment this year. That, that's not the schools, necessarily their goal is cost-cutting, their goal is education. And I hear what everyone's
I
saying.
can't-
Well, Nancy, can I finish?
Yeah,
I hear what everyone's saying, but again, if you look at per pupil spending on our students compared to the RSU, to Brewer, to Bangor, to Skowhegan, or to the state average, we're drastically lower. So I hear what everyone's saying. I'm not comfortable slashing the school budget all that much from what they've done here, and I just want everyone to be aware of that. I'm not gonna be very happy if we're going after the school budget much.
The funny thing is if you took the county out and gave it its own mill rate like we do on the bills,
yeah.
Yep.
we're even less.
Oh, yeah, 'cause the
That
municipal-
point two includes the increase in
Isn't
the
that
county
like
budget. our appropriation.
$700,000?
But, and there's, there's another piece of this thing. There's revenue sides too. Both the school and the city had increases in revenues in certain areas. We've talked about some of those pieces tonight, so it's not the whole picture here. And the other piece, Steve, is why I kind of talked at the beginning, is I didn't quite anticipate. We fast-tracked it so we could be with the schools, so unlike last year, you just didn't have to say, okay, schools, we'll vote, and then we'll figure it out. I think that's kind of what happened more on, whereas this year's cycle, I feel like we could maybe bring a few more things, as you said, thank you so much, Nancy, we haven't had some kind of crazy requests here. But also, I think in an ideal world, we'd be able to be because we're not at a council request level yet. We haven't included the police piece. We haven't, fully fleshed out some of the fire stuff.
And ours doesn't include that doesn't include capital.
Doesn't include capital.
So ours is going up.
The capital piece, there is a sheet that you were also given on capital that we have more memos, we'll talk more about that. We also have the surplus bond funding, which didn't get all consumed by the roads piece. We could just try to think of that for its next rounds of roads, or we consider some of the bigger capital to kind of cover that, because my goal is 2.9%. So yeah, to your point, Michelle, there could be some up in how we figure that out moving forward. And next year, I really would like to be at a council-approved level with 2 or 3 weeks before this vote happens, so that we can have this conversation and say, okay, this is the mix, the ratio, we've seen your presentations, we feel like the city is bearing a little bit too much of the cost. We've cut a firefighter, we've cut this, we've cut that. Maybe this, or vice versa, the city's coming in. There could be some years where we're coming in and the school is a little less, so.
Well, I don't think anyone's saying cut this, don't do that. I think what we're having a conversation is I haven't had this conversation this early in the budget ever this is my fourth year, and I have never been able to see this ahead of either of those transactions. So this is information that is new to me, and it's powerful, and it's great information that we wouldn't have had without the new finance administration. But it also brings up a question or two, is the school too heavy, or is the municipal too light, or, where is that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Nancy.
Well, thank you. I want to be able to raise an observation that I'm concerned with.
Yeah.
And not feel like, I don't even know what the adjective is. I'm not talking about slashing. I think the word slash, Patrick, I'm not talking about slashing the budget. I'm saying it's 6.9 and it's 0.2. And when I said nobody's made ridiculous proposals, I'm including the school. There was nothing in their proposals that had me rolling my eyes. It was I think, a much better, it was a better presentation than last year, and being able to have the context for it and understanding it all. It's all there, but I still look at that, and I look at the per pupil numbers are going down, but also I understand the complexity of the education system. So there's a lot there. I don't know what to do with it yet. We're going to meet again a couple times. And I hadn't thought of, capital isn't still there. So if we can get excited about really having a reasonable mill rate and a reasonable tax increase.
Yeah, especially with the TIF as another piece. That's kind of giving us this ability to go later on into still making some big investments, trying to keep to that 2.9% level. But hey, we're going to add a Parks and Rec department. That's already built in this budget regardless of TIF. They pre-funded some of it last year. It's consolidating it, but we might be able to go even bigger with the TIF funding and some of these investments, thanks to the good work Tammy and Michelle did in creating those districts, and now the debt service falling off on them. So there's a level of like comfort I have with this budget too, on being a little leaner on this year's, knowing that like we're going to be able to make those investments. We're going to be, we're going to be doing the SIP planning. We're going to be doing a TIF reimagine. We're going to be doing ordinance review and hopefully getting more new business. Where there's like we've been interviewing econ dev people, and momentum was something that was raised in here. There's like a momentum here that in Ellsworth, new business, that Dysarts that might, is likely to be coming in here. I do feel like while the municipal side is low in here, and we have said no to a fair amount of things, new harbor master, a police officer, firefighter, we didn't have a bunch of other requests, because that was this year's cycle, you all, and to kind of for last year too, Steve, right? I think sometimes we don't, like last year, we did have staffing requests. So this year, we don't have that. We increased our capacity to do a lot of things last year. And so, yes, we have a lower increase this year. And then there's some other things, like I'm a big transparency budget guy. As you all know, this is probably the first draft budgets this year and last year that were put online, so every citizen can see every single line item that we have in here. We'll do a final version, we'll put it up there. The school has their own different processes, and so there's like, for me, talking to Amy and Paul, knowing their community, like they're also doing these same kind of exercises themselves through their budget committees and their workshops, and it's not as clearly visible to, I think, us as a council, or us, you all as a council. And Amy is still working on this to get it down. So yeah, I know that's a very rambling answer, but I feel like next year we can get a couple more weeks, we can get to this area and then have time for, but even this year, I feel like, we're gonna get pretty close with the inflationary target on both sides of things. And we're making good investments in the city and some great investments in the school and doing so in a fiscally appropriate way. And, so I feel like this is gonna be a fair and fiscally responsible budget. And yes, the school is a little bit high, but let's wait until we're at the final. Let's wait until we get to the capital piece. And we'll also have some options for some additional, if we feel like we need to go down further where we need to be. And I'll try to build back in that like 5% valuation. That one would like, you can see it and just mess around with the valuation increase. But thank you, Nate. That's a critique on your calculator. This thing is awesome.
It is, it's cool to see that, and if we get to see the increased valuation from growth and what that does to,
Yeah, and the Larry piece too.
Mill rate,
And I'll get you all
helpful.
the latest reserve account funding.
Yeah.
To get you a piece there.
And then, there's also encumbrances, so things that we're not going to do this year,
Yep.
out of capital improvement, you encumber them in the next year, not rebudget for them. I think there's some things like that too that can be in here. So, and I don't know, I know that the school department was doing some of their fund balance forward. I don't know how much of that they were going forward.
yeah.
Yeah.
See, I'm not quite sure how that works out, but yeah. So it's, and I apologize tonight, my binder exploded, so everything was.
They are kind of at capacity.